Chapter 904. What do you want to know? Ozima squinted at her. Scroll. Vendi grabbed her hand worriedly. If Tilly was right, these people did not even come for Neverwinter. Instead, they came for the dissension within the Sleeping Island witches. If it was not handled properly, not only would the witch union get involved, but it would also reduce the trust of the newcomers, which would not be worth it. It's all right. The latter raised his eyebrows at her and then pointed to the witch who wanted to return to the eastern region. Since you miss your hometown, you shouldn't have been abandoned by your family. Instead, you were forced to leave the eastern region under the pressure of the church and followed the other refugees to Sleeping Island. Am I right? So what? Ozima answered quickly. The situation in the eastern region is like this. In the face of the red-haired witch's aggressiveness, Scroll didn't care in the slightest. Ever since the Queen of Clearwater, Garcia, looted Siwanshire and Valencia, that piece of land has never recovered. First, the demonic plague spread by the church was rampant, and then it was messed up by Timothy. The land was abandoned, and people could not make ends meet. Many people became refugees. The witch looked worried, but Ozima insisted. If we don't see it with our own eyes, we won't know if what you said is true. Since 2 years ago, His Majesty started the refugee shelter program. Now the population of Neverwinter has exceeded 100,000, more than 70% of which are refugees from all over Greycastle, especially from the eastern region and the southern region, Scroll said methodically. Your close relatives are probably among them. Can you tell me where you used to live? Town or village, any unique landscape or production around it. Do you want to find her family with this clue? She was not born in a big city, where every street and alley has a name and every neighbor knows each other's name. Scroll did not answer. She just combed her hair and looked at the witch with encouragement, like a teacher patiently waiting for a student to answer in class. My village doesn't have a name, the man said in a low voice after hesitating for a long time. There are no villages nearby either. It's so far away from Valencia that if I want to sell my wheat, I can only sell it to traveling merchants at a low price. If I have to say, some people who have gone out call it 16. 10. 6. Vendi repeated unconsciously. Because when they returned from Valencia, the 16th village they passed was their home. Scroll closed her eyes and slowly asked, let me think. Behind that village is a tributary of San Juan River, right? In the eastern region, tributaries of San Juan River are everywhere. Ozima snorted. How can the village take root without irrigation? But that one is different. Scroll waved her hand. It's shallow and narrow. Not only is it impossible for boats to pass through, but it will even expose the riverbed during dry periods. This is also the reason why the villages built on it can't transport food by water. But when it reaches the 16th village, the tributary will abruptly stop and turn into a huge lake. Even when the flow stops, the lake will not dry up. That's why the wheat fields in your village are always more luxuriant than those in other villages, right? The witch couldn't help but widen her eyes. You've been there. I've heard someone mention it. Scroll was silent for a moment. That person is now in Neverwinter, but he's not a resident of the 16th village. What do you mean? You'd better ask him yourself. She turned to look at the city hall clerk in charge of registration. What, ID number 00245578, furnace worker, should be in the North Slope area number 2 recycling waste slag. Go and bring him here. Yes, my lord, the latter answered and left. Half an hour later, the clerk led a red-faced man to the residential area. I don't know him. The witch looked at him and shook her head. Now you have nothing to say, right? Ozima sneered. There are so many people in the eastern region. Do you think you can? Ah, could it be, you're Tai Lan's daughter? The big man's joyful voice interrupted her. God bless you, you're still alive and so big. The witch was stunned. The Tai Lan you mentioned, is my mother. Who else could it be? Your eyes are so similar to hers, especially the mole at the corner of your eye. It's exactly the same. What shouted? But then again, you're much prettier than your mother. Wait, don't you remember me? No wonder. When I left the village, you were still young. When I came back, you were already gone. At that time, you were called Lan Hua, am I right? The names Tai Lan gave you are all names for beautiful flowers. That's just a childhood nickname. The witch said embarrassedly. Now I'm called Doris. Oh, that's a good name. Do you know, when I was digging the canal in the 16th village, people talked about you the most. They all thought you were kidnapped by a witch? And after listening to what's nagging for a while, Vendi finally figured out the ins and outs. It turned out that the red-faced big man lived next to the 16th village, which should be called the 15th village according to the naming convention. The two villages were not far from each other, so they had a close relationship. Because he envied the water source of the neighboring village, he first went to Valencia to learn how to dig canals. After that, he returned to his hometown and gathered a group of villagers, intending to widen the lake to the 15th village. Because of this, he had stayed in the 16th village for a long time. What about my parents and big brother? Are they still in the village? Doris apparently believed what story. After waiting for him to finish nagging, she asked eagerly, or did they also come to the western region? Scroll sighed softly. The red-faced big man's face also became gloomy. They didn't make it to Neverwinter. The second prince's army took away our food. When we arrived at the king's city, hungry and thirsty, we encountered a fierce plague. The nobles in the city refused to let us out and let us cry and struggle by the city wall. Almost all the people in several villages died, and only a few people survived until His Majesty sent a rescue team. He paused for a moment and said, "And your family didn't survive?" No. Doris covered her mouth, stood there for a moment, and then wept helplessly. I'm sorry, child. What suddenly became a little flustered, as if he wanted to comfort her, but did not know what to do. In the end, he walked over and gently pressed his hand on her head. Tai Lan repeatedly mentioned your name before she left. If she knew you were still alive and living a good life, she would be very happy, so, don't cry. Chapter 905. Azima did not feel good about this turn of events. She turned her head away and said nothing. Scroll waited until Doris had calmed down before she spoke again. I believe that many of you are like her, having lost contact with your hometown because of wandering. Even if you have the chance to go back, you will find that your hometown has been turned upside down. This is the purpose of registering your identity. As long as one of them comes to Neverwinter, even if it's just one of them, you'll immediately get the exact news. Some of them may even be your relatives. In addition, the City Hall's shelter team is still active in Grey Castle. This is a long-term process. More and more refugees will come after hearing the news. It's easier to get information by waiting here. Of course, if you need, the shelter team can focus on collecting information about your birthplace. They can even send people to contact you directly. His Majesty is now fully capable of doing this. Are you telling the truth? Azima raised her head and stared at Scroll. Will the big shots in the palace be willing to do this for us? If you're talking about City Hall officials, then I can also be counted as one of them. Scroll spread out her hands and said, in fact, the way Neverwinter operates is completely different from the past aristocratic territories. As long as a witch passes the examination, she can also get involved in the administration and become a member of the kingdom's management system. Her words caused a stir in the crowd. As for your question, the answer is, of course, yes, she continued. Neverwinter never intended to stop you from leaving or restrict your freedom from the very beginning, but it's really not a good time to leave. The war has not subsided and famine has broken out everywhere. Many cities and towns have become deserted places. Not only is it dangerous, but it's also easy to get nothing. His Majesty's army is currently on the way to recover the territory. When Grey Castle is unified and the order of the 4 regions is restored, you can decide where you want to go. At this point, Scroll picked up the registration form again. So, do you still think it's unnecessary to fill in this form? This time, none of the witches objected to it. As expected of Scroll. I didn't even think about it at that time. On the way back to the castle, Vendi couldn't help but sigh. This time, the witch union should leave a deep impression in their hearts. I'm just taking advantage of my position, Scroll smiled. The first batch of witches to arrive is only 46, so we'll be very busy for the next few days. Ugh. Vendi's voice became gloomy. What, you're not going to say that you're not suitable for the position of alliance manager again, are you? Scroll stopped walking. You know, His Majesty chose you because I have strengths that others don't, right? She suddenly laughed. Don't worry. Ever since His Majesty talked to me last time, I've already made up my mind. I was just thinking about how to receive them. In fact, in retrospect, even during the difficult times of the Witch Cooperation Association, I thought about accompanying my sisters to find the Holy Mountain. Compared to a few years ago, the situation now is like heaven and earth. If I were to say any more discouraging words, I'd be letting down Nightingale's chaos drink last time. That's right, Scroll said with relief. If you hadn't mentioned the drink, I would have forgotten about it. Since I've helped you so much, shouldn't you buy me a drink? How about tonight? I'll ask the kitchen to prepare some roasted mushrooms and fish slices. How about we drink and talk in the room? Just like last time. If it's not enough, Nightingale isn't in Neverwinter anyway. I'll make it up to her later. That's a deal, Scroll said with a smile. By the way, Vendi looked at her forehead curiously. Do you really remember the identities of the 100,000 people in Neverwinter? Don't you feel confused? I don't know how to describe it. Scroll pondered for a moment. At first, it's a bit complicated. If I want to recall something, I have to think from the beginning. For example, when I look up a name, I first think of the registration date of the person, then the registration booklet, and then the page number of the information I want to record. Not only is it complicated, but it also gives me a headache if I think too much. But after a long time, I found that the content gradually became orderly. What does that mean? It's like it's automatically sorted. As long as I start to recall, I can immediately see all the relevant content. Scroll paused for a moment as if she was thinking about how to phrase it. And the strange thing is, there are obviously many items, but I can see them all at the same time. Maybe this is practice makes perfect. I see, Vendi said admiringly. His Majesty once said that a person's memory is far beyond one's imagination. I thought it was incredible, but now I finally believe it. It's really a wonderful feeling. Scroll nodded. It's like I'm omniscient at that moment. When His Majesty unifies Greycastle and popularizes the City Hall system to all territories, I don't know if I can still remember so many things. Vendi could not help but feel a wave in her heart. What does that mean? It means that Scroll will remember the life of every person on this land. She will be history. Just as Vendi was about to say something, a rush of footsteps interrupted her. I've finally found you, Lady Vendi. A young City Hall clerk saluted them and said, a guy has been staying in the hall and refused to leave. He said he wanted to see the person in charge of the Witch Union. We told him that we would record it and pass on the message, but he insisted on telling us face to face. Did he say why he came? What's his name? Scroll asked with a frown. Pozek, the clerk gasped. He did say it, but it's probably a mistake. He said that when he was grazing in the suburbs, he found a woman covered in blood. She looked like a witch, but her consciousness was blurred and she couldn't answer any of our questions. We checked today's work plan and didn't find any arrangement for witches to go out of the city. Do you know about this? She's a native of Border Town with a good record and is one of the first trainers of the agriculture class. I don't think she'll cause trouble for the City Hall, Scroll said doubtfully. Could it be Leaf? That's impossible. Under the protection of the Heart of Forest, no one can hurt her. Vendi immediately denied the clerk's speculation. In terms of fighting ability, Leaf was one of the best in the Witch Union. However, This year's farming plan was very urgent. His Majesty had asked her to plant the seeds of golden twos in every territory they conquered. Therefore, she didn't go out with the first army. Instead, she stayed in the misty forest every day to accelerate the ripening of the wheat fields. Even if the enemy really broke into the misty forest under her control, it wouldn't be so quiet. Don't forget that there's a group of workers who are responsible for transporting wheat seeds. Meanwhile, the border guards are monitoring the entire north. If they were attacked, they would have sounded the alarm. So it's a mistake. No matter what, let's see him first. If he's seriously injured, we can help him even if he's not a witch. Although Vendi said so, she felt a vague sense of uneasiness. Chapter 906. Walking into the city hall, the citizen who called himself Passacker was brought to the two witches. He was in his 40s and looked like a typical farmer. His skin was dark and his hands and feet were thick. His trousers were stained with dried mud and grass. I know you. The man looked a little nervous. He rubbed his wrinkled hands and bowed his head to scroll. You're the minister. My daughter is learning how to read in the academy that you run. She's a little stupid, so please don't mind her. Don't be nervous. Scroll smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Before I came here, I was half a farmer. But my field is the ever-changing sea, and my harvest is not as stable as yours. As for knowledge, it doesn't matter who is the learner. As long as you have enough time, even the most stupid person can master it. So, your daughter will graduate successfully. Passacker relaxed a lot and grinned. I switched from farming to herding in the last 2 years because His Majesty said that a new profession would pay more. He bowed to Vendi and said, You must be the manager of the Witch Union. I thought I wouldn't see you today. Although Vendi was not as influential as Scroll, as the person in charge appointed by His Majesty, she often appeared in all kinds of important ceremonies. With her bright red hair and unforgettable figure, it was not surprising that she was recognized. Just call me Vendi. You said you found a woman covered in wounds in the suburbs. Why did you think she looked like a witch? Because ordinary people can't have parts that only animals have, right? Passacker scratched his head. At first, I thought it was just a bloody rag and was going to tear it off and throw it away. I didn't expect it to be connected to the woman. I took a closer look and found that it was actually an animal's tail. An animal's tail? Vendi's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly remembered that more than 2 months ago, there was indeed a strange witch who came to Neverwinter. As she had neither joined the Witch Union nor had any close contact with her sisters, all she knew about the witch came from Nightingale. One of the things that Nightingale repeatedly said was that the witch had an inhuman appearance with wolf-like ears and a long tail. Although she looked strange, His Majesty had praised her as beautiful. The witch was named Lorgar, a tribal princess from the southernmost region. Was she the witch that Passacker had found? Where is she? Vendi asked anxiously. Take us to her. The farmer did not bring the wounded back home but put them in a temporary rest shed in the pastoral area. Wendy's heart sank when she saw Wolf Girl lying motionless on the bench with her clothes stained red with blood. Judging from the mutilated ears, she should be Lorgar. But, what had happened to her to make her look like this? It was not an exaggeration to say that she was covered in blood. It was obvious that she had been injured more than a day or 2 ago. Some of the blood had dried up and turned dark brown, while some of the blood was still wet and oozing out slowly. She was covered from head to toe in bandages. Although the wound could not be seen directly, anyone who saw it would know how seriously injured she was. Sir, she's a witch, right? Passacker asked. Wendy was in a daze for a moment and didn't answer. It was Scroll who answered him, Yes, she's a witch. You did a good job. That's good. Didn't His Majesty announce in the announcement that we should report to the City Hall immediately if we find a witch? Passacker heaved a sigh of relief, but he soon became worried. Can this girl still be saved? His words seemed to awaken Vendi. She said in a low voice, I don't know, but we'll try our best. Scroll, please take care of her for me. I'll go to Her Highness Tilly. Okay, leave it to me. Now that Nana and Lily were not in the city, Leaf's herbs could help with minor injuries, but Lorgar's serious injuries were no different from a death sentence. It was only a matter of time. Fortunately, the first group of migrants from Sleeping Island had just arrived in Neverwinter. If it was that person, he might be able to save her life. Thinking of this, Vendi ran faster. She had to make the most of her remaining time. Although the other party was not a member of the Witch Union, since they had come to Neverwinter, they must have been guided by God. Under this guidance, Lorgar had already formed some kind of relationship with them. She did not want to lose any more sisters. 3 days later, Vendi walked into the bedroom with a basin of hot water. The strong smell of medicine immediately hit her nose. How is she? I can only say that she's still alive. Ashes shook her head. Her injuries have far exceeded the self-healing limit. It was a fluke that she made it back to Neverwinter. If it were a witch with ordinary willpower, she would have died in the wilderness. As the most experienced extraordinary in emergency treatment, Ashes naturally took over the nursing work. After taking off the bloody clothes, she took off the bandages and examined Nightfall's body. It was shocking to see that under the bandages, there were many open wounds, some of which even exposed the bones. It took half a day to clean up these wounds. But you don't have to worry too much, she said, pointing to Nightfall on the other bed. Don't you see that she looks much better than she did yesterday? Really? Nightfall said weakly. Why don't I feel like the situation is getting better? Tonight, we have steamed chicken, fried eggs, salt-baked bird beak mushrooms and a bottle of chaos drink. Ashes curled her lips. How do you feel now? Nightfall swallowed and said, well. I do feel better. See. Vendi breathed a sigh of relief and nodded to Nightfall. Thank you for your hard work these days. It's nothing. She forced a smile. After all, you've helped Iffy, which means that you've helped us. Just don't let her die. Otherwise, Don't worry. I won't. The first person that Vendi thought of was Nightfall. This former witch of the Blood Fang Association had an incredible ability to live in symbiosis with others through the seed of magic. When the seed was planted, the two lives would form a wonderful link. Not only could they share the pain, but they could also recover. In addition, half of Nightfall's replenishment would be provided to the symbiont, which was the most powerful guarantee to save a dying person. Roland had been in a coma for several months after the Battle of Divine Will. It was Nightfall's ability that kept him alive without food or water. Of course, Nightfall was not the only one who participated in the rescue. Under the order of Princess Tilly, a witch named Pandora stopped the internal and external bleeding of the wolf girl, which greatly relieved the pressure on the symbiont. Pandora was also the main healer of Sleeping Island and played an important role in destroying the rebellion of the Blood Fang Association. Leaf's herbs protected the wound and prevented it from further worsening. In addition, the purified water, which was kept in the castle's basement along with the ice cubes for emergencies, also played a key role in preventing Lorgar from being infected. Everyone had done their best. Whether the wolf girl could survive or not depended on her own perseverance. The animal messengers to the northern region had been released 3 days ago. Waiting for the reply would be the most difficult period. Just when Vendi was about to wipe the wolf girl's body, Lorgar's fingers suddenly moved. She was stunned for a moment and thought it was an illusion. Then she was surprised to see the wolf girl slightly open her mouth. She seemed to want to say something, but her voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible. Vendi suppressed her excitement, bent down and put her ear next to the wolf girl's mouth. This time, she heard the wolf girl's whisper. Demon. She repeated it again. Chapter 907. Every dusk, Vader would go out to patrol. Most of the time, he would circle around Neverwinter with 2 or 3 subordinates. Occasionally, he would act alone. Theoretically speaking, he was now the Minister of Police and the third in command of the Kingdom Security Bureau, so he did not need to patrol in person. However, he preferred the feeling of going into battle rather than sitting in the office and making plans. It had been a year and a half since he came to the city of the Western region. He had two main impressions. First, the city was expanding at an astonishing speed. Previously, it only took him an hour to circle around the city. Now, it took him at least twice as long, not including the harbor in the south and the farmland in the east. Second, the law and order in Neverwinter could be described as incredible. The most common crimes were theft and brawling, which were also the most serious. Crimes such as murder, robbery, and kidnapping were rarely seen even once a month. It could not be said that there were no crimes at all. Especially after a large number of refugees poured into the city, the law and order had once deteriorated. However, with the concerted efforts of the police department and the witch union, the crime trend was soon curbed. His Majesty's emphasis on solving every case was not empty. Faced with Summer's backtracking ability and Vanilla's tracking ability, anyone who violated the law could not escape punishment. Due to the extremely high crime risk and cost, as well as the zero tolerance for black street rats, almost everyone could see the improvement in safety. The reason why he insisted on patrolling every day was because he wanted to experience this kind of peace. Looking at the relaxed expressions on everyone's faces as they walked at night, as well as their eyes that were filled with trust when they saluted him, Vader would always feel an indescribable sense of pride. It turned out that he could also become such a person, a respected law enforcement officer instead of a villain that was cursed by everyone. This was an experience that he had never experienced in his previous patrol team. Although the original intentions of the two teams were exactly the same, and the methods and tasks were also similar, they had created completely different results. In the end, it could only be said that the difference was due to the Lord's talent. "Chief, do you need me to follow you?" Whistle, who had just returned from the team outside, greeted Vader as he passed by the city hall. "Oh. You don't need to accompany that girl today. This, you already know." Whistle blushed. "Actually, we don't have to stay together every night." His words caused some onlookers to burst into laughter. "Then you have to be careful. Don't let anyone snatch her away." Shut up." Vader smiled and shook his head. "I'll be going alone today. You should pack up and go home first. Then." "All right, thank you, boss." Looking at Whistle's back, he felt a little emotional. When he left Valencia, he was alone and thought that he might have to live like this for the rest of his life. Who would have thought that he would be able to achieve what he had today? Perhaps after helping Kikuzum's father buy a neighboring house, he should find another companion. However, the moment Vader walked out of the city hall, a mournful alarm suddenly sounded in the sky above the city. Woo, woo, his expression suddenly changed. This sound was completely different from the previous alarm bells. It went from dull to high-pitched, and it would never be forgotten once it was heard. It represented the highest level of alert in Neverwinter, and it had never appeared even once during the long months of demons. In fact, he had only done relevant rehearsals during maneuvers. This was the first time he had heard of it. According to regulations, when the highest level of alert was sounded, Neverwinter would be under martial law. The city gates had to be completely closed, the police would be responsible for clearing the streets, and the First Army would be sent to the defense line. "Boss." Several people, including Whistle, rushed out of the office. Vader turned around and saw that the entire city hall had come to a standstill. Everyone stood there dumbfounded, as if they did not know what to do. His Majesty was now leading the army to recover the Kingdom of Greycastle, so this could not be a maneuver. What on earth had happened for the garrison to issue such a stern warning? Damn it, it just so happened that Neverwinter's defense was at its weakest. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "What are you waiting for? Get moving. Whistle, call all the people on vacation. Firehead, take the rest of the people and follow me to the city wall. Do what you did during the maneuver, understand?" This thunderous rebuke not only woke up the police members, but also the administrative officials in the hall. "Yes, I understand." City Hall immediately became busy, but Vader was not in the mood to care about the group of civil officials. He led a group of police officers and rushed out of the castle district. Seeing the confused faces of the residents on the street, he suddenly felt a headache coming on. As the highest level of alert was a system set this year, it did not even have a citywide maneuver. Perhaps the one who set it, His Majesty, did not expect to encounter such an emergency so soon. But since it had happened, it was obviously a mistake on the garrison's part. If it were him, he would have sounded the alarm at the same time to quickly evacuate the wandering residents on the street. But now was not the time to complain. Vader clapped his hands and focused the attention of the surrounding residents on him. Everyone, listen up. Go home immediately and don't stay on the street. This is the warning of an enemy attack. I repeat, go home immediately. Go home immediately and don't stay. Firehead and the others followed suit and shouted. Fortunately, the police department was usually trusted by the residents. In addition, the municipal department had repeatedly popularized the routine alarm response method. After hearing the warning, everyone began to move towards the residential area. Just like this, the group of people shouted as they rushed to the border city wall. Soldiers could be seen everywhere on top of the wall, their flags fluttering in the afterglow of the setting sun. The cannons on the high platforms had also taken off their jackets, their long barrels facing the vast grassland in front of them, as if they were waiting to give the enemy a painful blow at any time. Seeing this scene, Vader could not help but calm down a lot. As long as the First Army was here, no matter how many people there were, they would be an impregnable line of defense. This was a result that had been proven in many battles. Soon, the police were involved in the security of the scene and maintaining order. But what puzzled him was that although the highest level of alert was still echoing above the city, why was the western region grassland and the forest completely silent? The enemy, where was he? At the same time, in the conference room of the Lord's castle, another group of people was arguing. Chapter 908. According to His Majesty's plan, the City Hall, the Security Bureau, the First Army, and the Witch Union were the four agencies of the same level, which formed the main administrative bodies of Grey Castle. Except for the Security Bureau, which was the most special agency, the other three agencies had to be cooperated and supported by the relevant departments. The original intention of this set of rules was undoubtedly to better utilize the power of the entire kingdom. Usually, with His Majesty in charge, it would be difficult for anything to go wrong. However, the problem was that when His Majesty was not around, it was very difficult for the three parties to reach an agreement in a short period of time. Therefore, when Vendi heard about the demons from Lorgar, the best solution she could think of was to issue a warning, fortify the city, and hold a decision-making meeting. Of course, she knew how much trouble this would cause for the City Hall. The breeding wheat fields in the misty forest produced hundreds of bags of golden twos every day. They needed to be transported to the docks and shipped to the northern region, the Southern Territory, and His Majesty's newly recovered territory. In addition, the collection of wood, mushrooms, and fruits from the forest would be affected, and the animal husbandry on the grassland would come to a standstill. Barev's words were not completely exaggerated. Originally, when the Third Battle of Divine Will began, a new city wall would appear to the north of the border, covering half of the grassland. Not only would it form multiple checkpoints with the existing city wall, but it would also improve the efficiency of the defense line in the impassable mountain range, making the ore smelting area and factories in the north of the city safer. Even in times of war, the resources from the forest and North Slope Mountain would not be cut off. However, this plan was still on paper. No one had expected the news of the demons to come so soon. Compared to the financial losses, she had to make a more prudent choice. The demons are the basis, mortal. Is it hard to understand? The light curtain on the wall of the conference room rippled, and Elchit's disdainful voice came into everyone's mind. Anything related to the demons can't be taken lightly. They're not stupid demonic beasts. They won't wait until you're fully prepared to attack. I don't think you're aware of how terrifying they are. What a pity. When I saw that mortal king, I thought you guys had improved a lot in the past hundreds of years. As allies against the demons, the tequila survivors and the sleeping spell had the right to attend the meeting. The leaders of both sides, Pasha and Tilly Wimbledon, agreed with Vendi's decision. Bhairav was so angry that he almost laughed. I don't know how scary the demons are, because they have never appeared in front of me. Do you think they can kill people through the air? You keep saying that we need to be prepared, and I agree with that, but the problem is that we can't even see the shadow of the enemy. To the west is the concealing forest controlled by the witches, and to the east is the sentry tower built on the peak of the impassable land. Between these two barriers is a grassland without any cover, and any of the enemy's movements can be detected from miles away. Do we really need to be so cautious? Vendi could see that the director of City Hall was really attentive to the task given by His Majesty. During the last meeting, he did not even dare to breathe in front of the monster-like original carrier, but now he actually dared to retort and even ridicule. I think it's necessary, Ashes said. In fact, I suggested it to Vendi. Why? Or is it because of an inexplicable witch's dream? Bhairav knocked on the table. Don't tell me that you trust her. If she's really trustworthy, or if your relationship is so close, she should have been a member of the Witch Union long ago. That's not the reason. It's based on my judgment of the facts, Ashes explained calmly. I've fought with her before, so I know her strength. If it were just one or two demonic hybrids, she wouldn't have been so embarrassed. According to the information we have so far, without the support of magic stones, the Mad Demon's combat ability is similar to that of a medium-sized demonic hybrid. Even if Lorgar can't win, she can still transform into a wolf and easily get rid of the enemy. What are you trying to say? She probably encountered more than 10 demons, and there were flying devil beasts chasing her in the sky. That's why she was so seriously injured. Ashes said word by word, besides, we found a map on her. If the handwriting is correct, it should be left by lightning. Although we don't know the details, we're sure that after she left Neverwinter, she's been active in the uninhabited wasteland. If such a group of demons suddenly appeared in the barbarian land, we have to be on our guard no matter what they want to do. I also agree with this judgment. Pasha's voice was much gentler than Alka's. It's just a blink of an eye for the devil beasts to travel a few miles. If they really want to attack Neverwinter, I'm afraid that by the time the devil beasts land, the news from the sentry posts might still be on the way back. Moreover, most people don't know what demons are. If they directly rush into the city without any precautions, the impact will be absolutely incalculable. Tilly also added, at least the alarm can let them go home to hide, and to a certain extent, it can prevent the spread of fear. But... Bhairav was speechless. Compared with the previous few people, Princess Tilly's words were obviously more authoritative. It was not because she was the leader of the Sleeping Island Witches, but because she had the blood of the Wimbledon family flowing in her veins. As a member of the royal family and the sister of the current king, the old director undoubtedly had a lot of concerns. He turned to look at the person in charge of the army, a taciturn middle-aged hunter, who seemed to be trying to win over a supporter. However, the latter was still staring straight ahead, as if he did not care about the debate at all. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little tense, Vendi encouraged herself, stood up and said, I've already sent the message to the northern region, and I believe His Majesty will give the order as soon as possible. Also, Lorgar may wake up at any time, so please don't worry too much, Sir Director. After all, as long as we get more accurate information, the martial law can be adjusted at any time. Therefore, before that, it's better to be cautious. She paused and said, as for the task given by His Majesty, we can also make up for it in other ways. Bhairav frowned and asked, such as? Perhaps we can use the devouring worms to transport the wheat from the misty forest to the third border city. Vendi looked at the tequila survivors on the light screen and said, in this way, even if the workers don't leave the city, they can still load the wheat seeds onto the cargo ships. Huh? Alka said unhappily, we're warriors, not porters, but for the sake of our ally, we can do this. Pasha stretched out her tentacles and curled them around Alka's body, although she did not seem to have a mouth at all. Vendi nodded gratefully and continued, and the livestock can be transported in the same way. Honey is quite good at manipulating animals, so you don't have to worry about them being scared by Fran. There is no shortage of grasslands in the western region, and there are many undeveloped areas along the Redwater River that can be temporarily used for grazing. Although Berev was still not very satisfied, his eyebrows had eased a lot. Chapter 909. In the following week, the atmosphere in the castle was extremely serious. The heads of the major departments had to hold an hour-long meeting every day to report on their respective situations. What? Haven't you found any traces of the demons? Berev sipped his tea and looked around. Perhaps Vendi's promise to take all the responsibility had eased the old director's worries, or the Golden Two's transfer plan was gradually coming to fruition, but he looked much more relaxed than he had in the first few days. The sentries of the First Army have pushed the cordon to the border of the grassland, but they still haven't found anything, the head of the garrison army replied concisely. Further north is the barbarian land with dense forests. Without enough logistical supplies, it's difficult to further expand the search area. This is the limit of mortals' abilities. Not to mention demons and demonic beasts, even the insects and ants living there can easily kill you. Alchak seemed unwilling to let go of any opportunity to ridicule. Leave this task to us. The gods' punishment witches are in groups of 10 and have advanced to the Pearl Lake area, 30 miles from the fertile plains. They have set up a small sentry point there. Pearl Lake? Vendi asked. It's the place marked on the Wolf Girl's map with many nests. It used to be a dense spring lake, but now it's almost become a swamp. Will they be in danger? We have much more experience in dealing with demons than you do. A god's punishment which can handle 3 to 4 mad demons at the same time. As long as there are 5 of them, they can even wipe out a small patrol team of demons. Alchak said confidently. Of course, if the Wolf Girl really encountered a small patrol team, the enemy's main force is probably not far from us. Can't they act alone? Berev asked curiously. Their demand for the red mist means they can't go too far from the supply point. After all, demons can't be self-sufficient like humans. So, they're so far away from Neverwinter. Why can't they lift the alert? Unless we set up a sentry point every 3 to 4 miles and surround Neverwinter like a net, we can't guarantee that the enemy won't sneak in. Even so, it doesn't make much sense, another High Witch, Celine, added. Without the support of the Sigil of Listening, the moment the search team noticed the devil beasts, it was already too late to send the news back. Hearing this, Vendi could not help but sigh in her heart. The complicated environment of the barbarian land was like an invisible barrier that limited Neverwinter's line of sight to the south of the grassland. The entire northwest was like a mystic realm shrouded in fog. All they could do was slowly search for traces of the enemy in this chaos. Lorger's news came at a bad time. If only Sylvie, Lightning, Maggie, and Nightingale were still here before His Majesty left for the expedition. Even if they wanted to find out the situation in the entire north, it would only take them 1 or 2 days to do so. Her ability was too weak in such a situation. Although you may think that I'm being nosy, but Mr. Director, can you tell me how the people are reacting these days? Tilly suddenly asked. Are they afraid or panicking? Don't mention it. Berev quickly put down his teacup and bowed to Princess Tilly with his hand on his chest. Everything in the city is under the control of City Hall. Recently, our clerks have received a lot of inquiries, but most of them are about the whereabouts of the enemy and whether the First Military needs help. That is to say, not only are they not panicking, but they are also full of fighting spirit. Even the efficiency of the night shift has increased a lot. Please rest assured that absolutely no one will associate this matter with the witches of Sleeping Island. Is that so? That's good. Of course, there are still complaints. At least the price of bird beak mushrooms and pine cones has risen. The old director glanced at Vendi. If we don't lift the alert as soon as possible, the eggs will soon follow in their footsteps. We can put this aside for now, but I think it's better to publicize the demons as soon as possible. After all, they are completely different from the previous enemies. Tilly said worriedly, if someone fanned the flames and brought up the demons' minions again, I'm afraid that it would cause an irreparable blow to the trust between witches and ordinary people. This Berev hesitated. I have to ask His Majesty. Then write it down in today's record. Tilly looked at Vendi. I understand. The latter nodded. When she was about to summarize the contents of each report, a series of rapid footsteps came into the conference hall. Before they could see anyone, Belle's voice rang out, Lady Wendy, Miss Wolfe, she's awake. What? Everyone suddenly stood up. Vendi could not wait to say, I'm going. Ahem, I'll go and have a look. Berev was about to follow, but Ashes stopped him. That's a girl's bedroom. You'd better wait here for the news. When Vendi walked into the room, Lorgar was struggling to get up from the bed. Her face was pale, and only half of her long ears were left. They drooped softly on the top of her head, and her hair looked dull. Just this small action caused her forehead to be covered in sweat. I didn't expect. I'm still alive. She gasped and turned to look at the crowd that had rushed into the room. How long have I been unconscious? It's been 10 days since we found you. Vendi gently pressed her back on the bed. Don't move. Your limbs, bones, and even internal organs have suffered serious injuries. 10 days is not enough for them to recover. You're still alive because of Nightfall's seed of symbiosis. Before Nana comes back, it's better for you to continue to rest. After learning the function of the seed of symbiosis, Lorgar bowed slightly to Nightfall, who was lying on the other bed. Thank you. Actually, it's nothing. Nightfall shrugged, pretending to be indifferent. I think it's not bad to lie here and drink chaos drinks every day. What did you encounter in the depths of the barbarian land? Ashes asked in a low voice. When you were unconscious, you mentioned the demons many times. Indeed, and there was more than one. Lorgar closed her eyes, as if recalling the scene at that time. At that time, I was tracking a hybrid demonic beast, and then I encountered 2 demons alone. They might be sentinels, or they might just be hunting demonic beasts. She took a deep breath. I killed them, but I didn't expect that it was just a drop of water in the army of demons. More demons swarmed to the Tequila ruins. Their numbers were incalculable, and there were some incredible giants among them. Chapter 9-10. After discovering the enemy's main force, Lorgar knew that it was time to retreat. Just as the great chief Roland and Lightning had said, she could not deal with such an opponent alone. It was more important for her to send the news back to Neverwinter. B3 she had already proved herself in the previous battle. If the demons took root here, she would have many opportunities to fight with them in the future. Although she had made a decision in her mind, she did not choose to leave immediately. Instead, she planned to find a high point and observe the demons' movements. She had only said, I saw many demons, which could easily make people think that she had fled back. If she could bring back more information, even the great chief would have to owe her a favor. In this way, no matter whether the other party's words were out of concern or sarcasm, it would be self-defeating. What she wanted was not an apology, but recognition. Even in a battle of life and death, she could still play an important role. To put it simply, it was her personal glory. To put it more deeply, it would greatly improve the importance of the Wild Flame clan in the great chief's heart. So she did it. Of course, she would not say these thoughts out loud. She simply described it as curiosity. Soon, Lorgar found an abandoned stone tower not far from the Tequila ruins. Although the tower was almost half destroyed and covered with moss and vines, it was still the best observation point nearby. To make it easier for her to retreat, she did not put on clothes. Instead, she carried her bag on her back and climbed to the top of the tower in a cloak. The big hole at the top was just enough for her to hide. Coupled with the curtain-like vines, the devil beasts that flew over her several times failed to find her. Then, she finally saw the true face of the giant monsters. They were not living creatures. They're not alive. Hearing this, Vendi could not help but break the silence and ask. I can only think so, Lorgar said in a low voice. They don't look like living creatures at all. Instead, they look like... What do they look like? The iron bridge you built over the Redwater River. Everyone looked at each other, finding it hard to understand. Bridge? At that time. I also felt that it was unbelievable, but it was the truth. She coughed weakly. It had a straight torso like the deck of a bridge, and 4 long legs were distributed on both sides of its body like bridge piers, but, whether it was the torso or the limbs, they were not covered with any flesh. Through the hollow bones and metal pieces, I could clearly see the scene behind the monster. Vendi couldn't help but gasp. A steel bridge that could move by itself? Was this something created by the devil? Lorgar paused for a moment before continuing. Each skeleton monster is at least 8 to 9 feet tall, and there are many demons fixed on top of it. From afar, it looks like layers upon layers of insect eggs. There's a large skin pouch hanging from its abdomen, as if it's an organ peeled off from something. Not only can you feel its pulse, but you can also see the dark red mist surging inside through the skin. She clenched her fists and gently placed them on her chest. 3 gods above, those monsters look extremely evil. Ashes frowned. And then they crouched around the ruins, and hundreds of tubes dropped from the skin pouch and inserted into the ground, causing the surrounding land to become dark brown caked. The weeds and trees quickly withered, as if they were sucked dry of life. Most of the demons also sank into the ground, leaving only hundreds of mad demons and a dozen devil beasts to continue to move around the ruins. They should be responsible for patrolling and investigating tasks. Did you see a kind of demon with countless eyeballs and tentacles? Vendi asked while recording the wolf girl's findings. They tend to stay in high places, and at first glance, they look like a wriggling mass of sarcomas. The multi-eyed demon? Lorgar shook her head. Lightning mentioned its danger to me, but I didn't see it among the demon army. Then your injury is, I underestimated the enemy. She looked a little depressed. I hid at the top of the tower for 3 days, and the devil beasts flew over this area many times, but there was no sign that they wanted to thoroughly investigate this place. I thought the horn sounded by the mad demons didn't attract the attention of the main army, but when I retreated, I found that several groups of demons had already been lurking nearby. Wait, they can do this kind of thing? Nightfall asked in surprise. You used to say that demons are strong but simple-minded beasts, right? That's true for the demons at the bottom, but it's different when there's someone commanding them, Tilly said thoughtfully. There's probably a senior demon among them. There's no perfect way to deal with unknown enemies. Ashes patted her on the shoulder. It's already very rare that you could escape from danger with your willpower and return to Neverwinter alive. This was the first time Vendi had heard such a formal praise from an extraordinary. Maybe. Fortunately, that guy didn't come to me personally. Lorgar squeezed out a smile weakly. When my whereabouts were exposed, I immediately transformed into a wolf and fled under the cover of the night, which made them lose their aim. I didn't know how many demons there were, but I knew that there were always devil beasts hovering over my head. You killed all the demons? Tilly asked doubtfully. Vendi also had a trace of doubt. If the wolf girl could not get rid of the enemy, she would have been chased and intercepted endlessly, which was proved by her serious injuries. Moreover, she could only be beaten passively, so it seemed that she was in a desperate situation at that time. No, they gave up chasing me. Lorgar replied. I don't understand why. If they chased me for another day, I would have been the first to give up, but they chose to retreat. Red mist. Tilly quickly came to her senses. The demons must have run out of red mist. Do you still remember where they retreated? She rubbed her forehead and thought for a while. About 5 or 6 miles away from the grassland. Where's the map? Give me a map. Seeing Tilly draw the distance on the map, Vendi also understood what she meant. Those skeleton monsters were probably a magic machine that transported red mist, just like the siege beasts shown by the church. Lorgar's description indirectly proved this point. Whether it was the army sinking into the ground or the land polluted by red mist, it was exactly the same as the scene in the Devil's Town behind the snow mountain. If the devil beasts from the ruins could only reach the edge of the barbarian land, did it mean that Neverwinter was still in a relatively safe place? After understanding the general situation, Lorgar looked exhausted, and the bandage around her wound oozed blood. Chapter 9:11. Back in the conference hall, Vendi repeated the newly acquired information from beginning to end. When it came to the safe distance, Urcha rudely interrupted her. There is no real safe distance in front of the demons. The tequila only realized this after paying a heavy price. It is extremely dangerous to determine the battle zone based on the consumption of the red mist. For example, the devil beasts can carry multiple gas tanks, which greatly increases the distance of the surprise attack. Or they can bury a batch of gas tanks in advance and replace them during the march. Of course, the most direct method would be to build outposts and use these outposts as springboards to increase the range of our attacks. Fighting over the outposts would be the main theme of the entire Battle of Divine Will. Unfortunately, it would be difficult for us to find all the hidden outposts in the vast plains. Don't forget, the demons are more cunning than you think. Wendy could not help but imagine the scene described by the demon army. The overwhelming demon army launched a frontal attack while setting up outposts everywhere that could store red mist. Once the outposts were completed, the area would soon be occupied by a steady stream of demons, and the Union would lose the corresponding intelligence and resource supply, causing the surrounding areas to be in danger. In the end, it would be like a rolling snowball. The more land they lost, the more difficult it would be to move forward, until they could no longer resist the demons' attack. Then what do you think the probability of them attacking Neverwinter is? Tilly asked calmly. I have to say that you are lucky, or rather, we are all very lucky, Urcha muttered as she spread her tentacles. Although the red mist can't determine the enemy's limit, at least it can determine their intentions. In a short period of time, I don't think the possibility of the demons launching a large-scale attack on Neverwinter is high. Can you elaborate? It's still the red mist. The ancient witch nodded her warty head. All the demons' actions depend on the delivery of the red mist. Sinking into the ground means that they don't have enough supplies. Leaving only patrols instead of building a camp also proves this. Even if the demons attack the border, it should only be a small number of troops. Of course, whether there will be any subsequent changes depends on the situation at the scene. Tilly shifted her gaze to Pasha. Urcha's judgment is trustworthy, the latter waved her main tentacle. In the era of the Union, the Blessed Army team led by her won many victories in surprise attacks on Devil's Town, but she has a bad temper. My patience is only used on things that are worth paying attention to, Urcha snapped. Compared to the Devil Beast's long-range attacks, I'm more worried about those new war machines. I want to ask, how did the demons transport the red mist? Berev finally found a chance to speak. Similar to us, Pasha sighed. Inferior demons, trailers, enslaved hybrids, or modified siege beasts. The time it took for them to plan a war was similar to ours. Every time a war was about to begin, more than 10 red lines could be seen on the fertile plains. In order to intercept the red mist in the transportation, the Blessed Army, the ordinary combat witches, and even the common army must go all out. If we encountered a heavily guarded transport team, our blood would often dye the entire road red, so those red lines were not only the blood of the demons, but also the line of life and death for us. Alxia added. The last sentence caused the atmosphere to freeze for a moment. Although they had not officially fought with the demon army, everyone could feel the pressure that the powerful alien race had exerted on human beings more than 400 years ago. Under the influence of His Majesty, even Vendi knew the importance of logistics, and the means of transportation was undoubtedly the standard to measure the level of logistics. If the demons had the ability to build such a large machine to transport the red mist, it meant that they could provide a large amount of supplies to the front line with fewer troops. The reduction of the red lines would make every transport team more guarded. Perhaps what Lorgar saw would become the norm for the demons in the future. If it were not for Roland Wimbledon, she really did not know how to fight the fourth battle of Divine Will. The demons had probably undergone earth-shaking changes in the past hundreds of years, and the senior demons that acted alone and the huge skeleton monsters were proof of that. However, except for Neverwinter, the power of the other human kingdoms seemed to be much weaker than in the era of the Union. She did not even dare to imagine the scene of those noble knights charging fearlessly into the demon army. All in all, the current situation is very close to one of our previous inferences, except that the time doesn't match. Alxia probably realized that overemphasizing the difficulty of the war would hurt their morale, so he coughed and changed the topic. The black stone spire that can produce red mist needs to be built on a god's stone vein. It's not surprising that the demons would choose to seize the holy city ruins. After all, Tequila is the easternmost gathering place of God's stones on the fertile plains. Once the spire is erected, the red mist will directly cover the impassable mountain range. By then, all resistance will be meaningless. No one objected. The demons could attack from all directions without being restricted. Flying devil beasts were much more mobile than hydrogen balloons. As long as they left the city, they could be attacked. In this situation, human beings would not be able to hold on for more than a few years before collapsing. Although Vendi was not very good at war, she had participated in relevant meetings many times. She knew that both His Majesty and the Church of Hermes had formulated a plan to prevent the demons from seizing the Tequila ruins. It seemed that all three parties had the same idea. Fortunately, the demons have revealed their intentions in advance. There are at least 3 to 5 years before the bloody moon comes. We can be fully prepared and launch Thunder's attack. Alxia continued, even if we fail, the demon's closest black stone spire to the fertile plains is hundreds of miles north of Dragon's Pine Mountain. They won't have an advantage in terms of attrition. But one thing is for sure, the war has come. Vendi suddenly felt a lot of pressure on her shoulders. Wait. Berev suddenly shouted. I don't care how you fight, but you can't keep the city gate closed, can you? Now that we know that the demons are still far away from Neverwinter and won't attack for the time being, can we lift the alert and let the livestock farms operate? I also think Neverwinter needs a more reliable early warning system, the head of the garrison army said, which was rare for him. His Majesty once said that the more profound the defense line is, the more mistakes the defenders can make. Can we ask Miss Lotus to set up a few beacon towers at the border of the grassland? Of course, it would be better if it's the communication device that can connect dozens of miles in an instant, like what Sir Carter mentioned. In this way, the work of City Hall won't be delayed. The former was easy, but the latter was impossible without Anna and Roland. Besides, could the speed of the beacon towers really keep up with the Devil Beast's raid? Vendi hesitated for a moment and was about to answer when Pasha's voice sounded in her mind. Just leave it to us. Oh. What are you going to do? Ashes raised her eyebrows. Now that we know where the demons are stationed, things will be easier. Pasha stretched out her tentacles and put them in front of the light curtain. With this, we can create a more comprehensive view to monitor the demons, just like this light curtain. In her hand was a dazzling 5-colored stone. Vendi immediately thought of what number 76 Phyllis had done. Are you going to use it to locate the phantom instrument? Yes, as long as you crush it, the magic core will open the light curtain in the corresponding position. But this kind of magic stone is extremely limited. It's also the key to find the Chosen One's key, so I can only use it in the most important place. But she suddenly thought of another problem. We need to send people to the Tequila ruins, right? But the demons have already. Don't worry, we don't need to trouble you. Since it's our idea, we'll do it. Tequila can't do such a cowardly thing as coming up with a plan and then throwing it to someone else to implement. Besides, this is not a big deal. Every god's punishment which is ready to sacrifice themselves. Chapter 9:12. His Majesty. Roland? The voice seemed to come from far away, slow and soft. It wasn't until he felt a slight itch in his ear that Roland suddenly came back to his senses. You're distracted again. Nightingale leaned over the long table and looked him in the eyes. She supported her slightly tilted chin with one hand and shook her white index finger with the other. Obviously, she had used this finger to play with his ear. Ah. Really? Roland cleared his throat and pretended to look at the sea's statistical report. Maybe it's because today's weather is especially suitable for a nap. But this isn't the first day. Nightingale flashed back to the reclining chair at the side of the tent. It's been like this since we came back from the reflection church. What happened? Roland subconsciously wanted to deny it, but the words stopped at the tip of his tongue. Lies were ineffective against Nightingale, and he couldn't lie to himself. Even though almost a week had passed, he still couldn't figure it out. I did find something wrong. But, it's too strange, and I don't know how to explain it. If it's not easy to explain, you don't have to tell me. Nightingale held the back of her head and looked up at the sky. My brain isn't as good as yours anyway. Even if I tell you, it's unlikely that it'll help. If it's Anna, she should be able to help. I didn't tell her either. Roland shook his head with a bitter smile. Really? Nightingale immediately turned over from the reclining chair. Why? Because the degree of strangeness of this matter is beyond the scope of my understanding, he said bluntly. But it just doesn't affect anything. In other words, it's just my personal trouble. Telling her won't make any sense other than adding to her troubles. I see. Nightingale blinked and showed a look of sudden realization, but Roland knew that she didn't understand at all. She just didn't understand. So, don't mention to her that I'm always in a daze, he said. No one can solve this problem except me. Hey, of course. For some reason, Nightingale suddenly became happy. She first patted her chest, then took out a piece of grilled fish from her bag and threw it into her mouth, looking satisfied. After stabilizing the other party, Roland secretly sighed. Although his eyes were looking at the statistics, he could not focus at all. The scene in the secret chamber of the church kept floating in his mind. Why would a fictional character appear in the early days of the Union? In fact, judging from the portrait, she had existed even earlier. Afterward, Roland asked Isabella, Agatha, and Phyllis, but all the answers he got were no. That period of history was too distant for Tequila, and no one could tell who the person in the background was. They could only infer that she used to be famous. He had always thought that there were two kinds of people in the dream world. One was the defeated people who had been devoured by Zero. They were bound to the soul building and were still inextricably linked to this world. The most obvious characteristic was that they had almost the same appearance and the memory fragments in their residences. The other kind were fictional people who came from the background of the dream world. Part of them was extracted from his brain, and the other part was fabricated by the world itself. But now, his understanding was shaken. According to Isabella, Zero's lifespan was roughly between 200 and 250 years old, and there were corresponding records of her service to the Pope. This should not be wrong. But the problem was that this pure witch who never aged could not devour a person from 800 years ago. Her age might be very shocking for ordinary people, but it was nothing in the long river of history. After all, she was still a person born in the era of the Church. In terms of seniority, Agatha and the others could be her grandmother. So did the person in the portrait run into the dream world by herself? This idea was even more unbelievable. How could an ancient person survive in modern society and disguise herself flawlessly? Moreover, before the dream world appeared, where did her soul reside? In addition, the appearance of Lon could also refute this conjecture. She could be said to have an extraordinary temperament, but she was definitely not beautiful. This showed that she was not a witch. Without her strange ability, no matter how outstanding a person was when they were alive, they would only turn into dust after 100 years of death. Putting aside the above two ideas, the most reasonable explanation was the most bland one, which was that the two of them just met face to face, and everything was purely a coincidence. If he adopted this idea, it would save him a lot of trouble, but in his heart, Roland still could not convince himself, was this really a pure coincidence? If he wanted to further find the answer, he was afraid that he would have to find the person herself. Whenever I thought about the dream world that was becoming more and more unfathomable, I would subconsciously resist it. However, being troubled by an unknown secret didn't feel good either. After nearly a week of hesitation, Roland finally made up his mind to choose the lesser of two evils. Of course, what helped him to make up his mind was the tequila god's punishment witches who begged him in every possible way, as well as the rather idle waiting time after touring the holy city of Hermes. The process of entering the dream world was still very familiar. When he opened his eyes, the time was still fixed at the time when he left last time. Although it had been more than a month since the last time, the surroundings had not changed at all. On the bedside table was a group photo of trainees, as if he had just returned from the headquarters of the Martialist Association. Roland took out his cell phone, scrolled to the column of Garcia's number, and pressed the dial button. The phone was quickly connected, and there was even breathing coming from the other side of the phone. Hello. He looked out of the window. At this time, the sky was just beginning to brighten. Are you doing morning exercises? If you know, then don't talk nonsense. Garcia's tone was still very disdainful, but at least compared to before, it was not cold and unapproachable. What's up? Well, I have a question to discuss with you. How about now? I'll come to you right away and treat you to breakfast. So urgent? Garcia was silent for a moment. Then come down. I'm in the alley in front of the tube-shaped apartment. Wait for me. Roland hung up the phone, put on his clothes as fast as he could, and rushed out of the room. When he passed by the living room, he saw Zero, who was disheveled and had a sleepy face. Apparently, she had just gotten out of bed. Her wrinkled pajamas had slid down to one side, revealing half of her white and tender shoulders. She was wearing a pair of oversized men's slippers, which undoubtedly belonged to him. He put his hand on his forehead and shook his head. He had to stop and turn around to help the little girl fix her collar. Oh, wait. I'll go boil water later. Zero said vaguely. Chapter 9:13. Here you are. 2 bowls of braised beef vermicelli. The owner brought the vermicelli to the table with a ruddy face and wiped the table with a towel. Apparently, he was very proud of the Martialist's visit. After all, Garcia was the star of this apartment. Thank you. And 1 more fried egg. Roland took out 2 pairs of chopsticks and said, 1 for each of us. Okay. If I were you, I wouldn't invite a woman to have breakfast here. Garcia rolled her eyes. No wonder you're still single. This is slander. If it were not for his sense of responsibility, those God's punishment witches would have already, well, Zero has to go to school later. I have to send breakfast back. If it's too far. I know, so don't do it again. Garcia interrupted him. She skillfully opened the disposable chopsticks and stirred the shallots and beef on the vermicelli. Soon, the bowl of vermicelli turned into an attractive reddish-brown color. The first bite was slightly cold. Instead of chewing slowly, she directly swallowed the vermicelli like a continuous ribbon, making a slight slurping sound. Roland's appetite was whetted just by hearing this sound. What? He curled his lips. Isn't your way of eating very authentic? I thought you weren't used to street snacks. That's your illusion, said Garcia, shrugging her shoulders. I've been here nearly 10 years. Which restaurant haven't I eaten in? It's just that a clean and spacious restaurant is a courtesy, and I don't like to be stared at all the time. Roland found that it was true. Not only the other customers in the stall, but also the passers-by would look in their direction curiously. After all, Garcia's silver-gray hair and well-proportioned figure were somewhat eye-catching. This is my oversight. So hurry up and get down to business. Garcia stared at him. Why are you so anxious to see me? The Martialist Association won't help you do anything illegal. Why does this girl look so alert? She just came back from the headquarters yesterday. How could she do anything illegal? Besides, is there anything more illegal than a hunting license? Roland hesitated for a moment. I want to see your master. Can you help me make an appointment? What? Garcia did not respond immediately. Your teacher. Lady Lawn. He casually made up an excuse. I feel very guilty for standing her up last time. I want to apologize to her in person. Garcia looked at him for a long time as if she didn't know him. Finally, she waved her hand and said, "Oh. Now you know how important it is to get my master's recommendation. But save it, she won't see you again. Maybe Lady Lan doesn't hate me as much as you think. Do you still want to say that she kindly explained a lot of things to you at the newcomers' assembly?" Garcia said disapprovingly. "Don't be delusional. Missed opportunities will not come back. Master will never take care of a person who is not punctual, let alone meet her. Let's try calling first," Roland insisted. "You." Garcia seemed to notice something. "You don't really want to apologize to her, do you?" "It would be nice if you could ask me about some martial arts training," he said, putting on a serious face. The corner of her mouth twitched. She probably wanted him to completely give up on this unrealistic idea, but in the end, she still took out her phone. "By the way, your master's number is, it's useless to tell you. If you don't have the association's data card, you can't call the headquarters." Garcia gestured for him to keep quiet. "Hello, it's me." The call only lasted for less than 3 minutes before she hung up. "I knew it would be like this. How did it go?" Of course she refused. "She even blamed me," Garcia said grumpily. "Your image in her mind is completely ruined. Every time she mentioned you, her voice dropped at least an octave." How could this be? Roland couldn't help feeling a little puzzled. According to her attitude at the newcomers' assembly, Lan apparently didn't care about him standing her up. Instead, she seemed to think highly of him. He originally thought that Lan's secret language was a way to use the force of nature to a high level, so it was not surprising that Garcia didn't know about it. Now it seemed that he really heard it wrong. At first, he didn't insist on knowing the answer to the riddle, and he even hesitated to enter the dream world. Now that he had encountered a setback, he didn't want to give up. "Okay." Roland drank a mouthful of soup. "When can we go to the headquarters again?" "When you solve the erosion by yourself and become an official martialist. Right now, you're just a newcomer." This condition is surprisingly easy, Roland thought. However, he remained calm and said, "I'll look forward to that day. By the way, do you still remember Ms. Lan's opening speech when we first arrived at the underground world?" "What's wrong? What did she mean when she said the Battle of Divine Will was not far away?" "Well," Garcia said helplessly, "my master liked a book written half a century ago called Raison d'être and recommended me to read it. The book made some conjectures about the emergence and evolution of civilization, calling it the choice of God. Of course, this God isn't a personified character, but a kind of rule, or the purpose of the continuation of all things. But these things are too far away and have nothing to do with us. Besides, the book is only circulated in the Martialist Association, so almost no one knows about it." Hearing this, Roland's interest was piqued. There was no doubt that this was another book that he had never seen before, which meant it was created by the dream world itself. "Can I have a look?" "The book is in the headquarters. I'll borrow it from the library when I report next month." Garcia looked at him strangely. "If I still remember this." Seeing that Garcia was getting suspicious, Roland hurriedly finished the noodles and excused himself to leave the shop. When the dream world ended the next day, he heaved a sigh of relief. If he had not been in contact with the Martialist Association, everything in the dream world would have seemed normal. However, as long as he was in contact with them, strange things would happen one after another. Although the exploration this time was not very smooth, it was not in vain. Moreover, the long-awaited God's punishment witches had once again regained their senses. Seeing their joyful faces, this trip was not in vain. When Roland was planning to open the dream world a few more times to speed up the time, Lightning flew into his tent with a swallow-tailed eagle in her arms. "Your Majesty, there's an urgent secret letter for you," the little girl muttered. "It's from Neverwinter. Directly from the western region? That's not a short journey. Did something happen in Neverwinter?" To save messengers' resources, the less urgent messages were sent to the Old King's city by ship, and Theo and the others were responsible for forwarding them, such as government reports. The swallow-tailed eagle was the largest of the animal messengers and consumed the most resources. Its advantage was that it was at the top of the food chain and was very safe, but its disadvantage was that it would take up a considerable part of the witch's control. Driving a swallow-tailed eagle was equivalent to driving 3 gray eagles, which was quite strenuous for Honey. Roland stroked the listless animal messenger and untied the seal from its feet. The moment he unfolded the letter, he could not help but be stunned. Chapter 9:14. 4 days later, all the senior officials of the northern region and Hermes gathered in the camp on the outskirts of the Holy City. The emergency assembly order had obviously aroused everyone's concern, but no one showed panic. Whether it was the general staff or the officers of the Western Front Army, they were just guessing whether His Majesty had a new target. Such discussions did not stop until His Majesty walked into the tent with a sullen face. "I called you here because I have something important to tell you." Roland knocked on the table. "We have to return to Neverwinter." This brief order instantly caused a commotion among the crowd. When he first received the secret letter, he had not made up his mind. After all the information mentioned in the letter was obtained through Lorgar Burnflame alone. Although it was shocking, there was no other proof. As for the cause and effect of the encounter with the demons, there was not much description in the letter. Moreover, the direction of the demon army was unknown, and changing the battle plan involved a lot of things, so he could not make up his mind for a while. However, in the next few days, Roland received several direct letters from the western region. Looking at the various animal messengers, he realized that this matter was probably not trivial. As expected, the second and third letters recorded the news of Lorgar's injury and rescue, the talking demon and the alarm in Neverwinter. The fourth and fifth letters were about the arrival of the witches on Sleeping Island and the internal strife. Each of them was a key event worthy of reporting. According to the order of delivery, the messengers should have arrived first, but the actual situation was completely reversed. From this, it could be seen that with the increasing urgency of the information, the messengers responsible for delivering the messages were also more and more advanced, so that the recently sent secret letters were the first to arrive. Combining these letters, Roland finally had a general understanding of the whole situation. And the special map of lightning mentioned in the third secret letter also confirmed to him that Lorgar had indeed gone to the Tequila ruins and planned to hone her skills there by fighting demons and demonic beasts. In this way, the reliability of the information was guaranteed. At the same time, he could not help but feel a little emotional about the wolf girl's persistence. Could it be that my persuasive tone when we first met was too harsh and agitated her? Fortunately, the result was good. The seed of symbiosis of Nightfall successfully saved Lorgar's life, and the demon's whereabouts were known in advance. If they had waited until late autumn to return to Neverwinter, the demons would have already established a foothold in the barbarian land. Based on this contribution alone, it would not be an exaggeration to award her with an Outstanding Contribution Award. Perhaps when he returned, he should satisfy this combat fanatic's wish and arm her into a self-propelled heavy firepower unit. This would at least be much faster than honing her skills. This is the cause of the matter. After Roland explained the key information in the secret letter, he glanced at the people present solemnly. Due to the change in the situation, the two-pronged attack plan can only be stopped in advance. From today onwards, all troops were to be prepared to evacuate from the sacred city in batches. I will depart in advance and try to return to Neverwinter as soon as possible. The atmosphere suddenly became solemn. Although most of the people present had long heard about the demons and knew that they were the biggest enemy of the entire Grey Castle and even the human race, they had never fought with the demons. They were a little confused by the sudden edict and did not know how to respond. Roland also knew that the news was too shocking and unexpected, so he did not urge them but quietly waited for them to digest and think. After a long while, Sir Schilt of the Advisor Department raised his hand and asked, "Your Majesty, is this reliable?" Whether it is Soroya's lair mark or Honey's animal messenger, they are not things that can be easily forged, Roland said affirmatively. Although we didn't conduct a second confirmation, considering that it is not easy to approach the demons, we can treat it as a special case. Then, what about the Kingdom of Dawn? The Duke of Evernight asked the key question. We must save him. Grey Castle will never give up on any of its allies. Roland looked at the worried Andrea. In addition, the King of Dawn must also pay the price. Wimbledon's wrath may be late, but it will never be absent. However, this matter has nothing to do with the First Army, so I will make other arrangements after the meeting. Seeing that he had made up his mind, no one said anything. The next step was for him to give specific orders, the advisor department to formulate a plan, and the others to carry it out. The First Army was no stranger to an emergency march. It was not a battle for the purpose of plundering, so the army could attack and retreat in an orderly manner. Even if Roland left first, there was no need to worry too much. The transportation of materials and personnel between the new and old holy cities was jointly undertaken by the newly established second-class City Hall of the Northern Region and Duke Kant. Isabella would also stay until the transportation was completed. With her and the new Nun Committee in charge, as well as the protection of the Northern Region garrison, the remnants of the church basically had no chance to encroach on this place. The Hermes Plateau had already become a part of Grey Castle's territory. As for this new organization named by Roland, which had been instilled with a series of words such as, the Archbishop is a usurper, the traitor broke the covenant, the witches were framed, the demons are the real enemy, and so on to revise the history of the church, such as, the Archbishop is a usurper, the traitor broke the covenant, the witches were framed, and the devil is the real enemy, it could be left to be seen in the future. His top priority was to restore the order of the Holy City so that it would not become a dead land before the Battle of Divine Will. The above instructions had more or less been implemented before the secret letter arrived, and now it was just a matter of speeding up the process. The only thing that needed to be explained in detail was the attack on the Kingdom of Dawn. After the meeting, Roland asked Andrea to stay. The main force of the First Army has to go back to defend Neverwinter, so the plan has to be slightly modified, he said directly. Please rest assured. With Her Highness Tilly and the Sleeping Island sisters around, Neverwinter will be safe and sound. The blonde witch was worried, but she still comforted him first. Besides, you've tried your best. If you can't do it, don't force yourself. You're wrong. Roland shook his head. If the First Army doesn't move, this matter will only be solved faster. Do you think that if I want Apan Moya's head, his castle and the knight can save him? Besides, I can't sit back and watch Otto Luashi die in vain. Solve it faster. Andrea was stunned. Do you want to? Chapter 9:15. But it's never been a problem to deal with the King of Dawn. The problem is how to control the order of the Kingdom of Dawn. If the successor in power is still the Moya family or the people who support the royal family, then this operation won't achieve its goal. You should know this very well. Roland looked straight into Andrea's eyes and continued, originally, my intervention would have justified this purge, but now, I'm afraid that the three major families will have to step forward. The reason was simple. Someone had to take over the chaotic political situation in the city of Glow after the fall of Apan Moya. The title of the King of Grey Castle and the strength of the First Army were enough to deter all the nobles who were eager to take action. Even if Earl Quinn became the regent, he would be regarded as the spokesman supported by the Wimbledon royal family. However, in the new plan, the major premise of the intervention of Grey Castle was difficult to achieve. The gods' punishment witches themselves were not political forces, so they could only be classified under the name of the three families. Otherwise, the diplomatic war would become a revenge assassination, which Roland absolutely wanted to avoid. This plan had both advantages and disadvantages for the Quinn family. The disadvantage was that they would become the target of public criticism, while the advantage was that their prestige would increase exponentially. If he could take this opportunity to control the City of Glow, the representative of the regent would have the opportunity to become the real new King of Dawn. Considering Earl Quinn's ability, the advantages should far outweigh the disadvantages. Andrea hesitated for a moment and quickly figured out the key point. But the benefits you'll get will be very limited. It's better than letting Appin continue to oppose me. At the very least, it can save Otto's life. Roland was noncommittal. As I said in the meeting, I won't easily give up anyone who has contributed to Greycastle. I see. I see. Her expression relaxed, and there was gratitude in her eyes. Miss Edith was right. You are indeed a benevolent king. What? Roland was slightly stunned. Edith can't. What did she say? Well, she said the same thing as you. Before the expedition, she knew that you would definitely lend a helping hand to Sir Otto. In fact, if it weren't for the Pearl of the Northern Region, I'm afraid I wouldn't have made the decision so quickly. Was there such a thing? Roland pretended to be calm and nodded. If that's the case, I'll write a letter to Earl Quinn. Other than the action steps, it also represents the Covenant of Greycastle. Although most people will make the right choice, I want this result to be 100% certain. Therefore, you have to follow the god's punishment witches to the City of Glow to ensure that he acts according to my plan. To be honest, I trust you, not your father, Earl Quinn, so I can only let you stay here for a while. Of course, once the problem is solved, you can return to Neverwinter with the witches. After letting go of her worries, Andrea regained her aristocratic elegance. She lifted the corner of her skirt and bowed slightly. Since you've already done this much, I naturally can't refuse anymore. Also, I have a letter for Her Highness Tilly. Please pass it on for me. It's nothing, Roland replied with a smile. After Andrea left, Nightingale frowned. What the hell is that guy doing? Are you talking about Edith? Roland rubbed his chin. Well, maybe they just talked about it while chatting. After all, both of them attended the decision-making meeting before the expedition. Why, can't she think that I'm a kind person? I don't think she would praise you like this even if you were the best in the world. Nightingale shrugged. She doesn't seem like a person who would talk about kindness. When Roland was about to say something, the guard outside the tent lifted the curtain and reported, Your Majesty, Lady Edith Conte wants to see you. Oh. That's interesting. He exchanged a look with Nightingale and then promised, let her in. Yes. The Pearl of the Northern Region walked into the tent and bowed. Your Majesty, I hope you can change your mind and stop interfering in the Kingdom of Dawn. Roland frowned. If you have any ideas, you should have brought them up in the meeting. Now that the decision has been made, if I go back on my word, wouldn't I be treating the order as a child's play? That's why I reported to you alone after the meeting, Edith said slowly. The plan can be carried out as long as some details are changed. In this way, in the eyes of outsiders, you didn't break your promise, but because of some unexpected factors, the mission couldn't be carried out as scheduled. Hearing this, Nightingale could not help but show herself. What on earth are you up to? First, you persuaded Andrea to come to Your Majesty for help, and now you're telling us not to interfere in the affairs of the Kingdom of Dawn. It's hard to believe that there's no conspiracy behind this. Most people would feel a little embarrassed or hesitant when their contradictory statements were exposed, but Edith was not moved at all, as if she had already expected this scene. Because the situation has changed, she said frankly. You can tell lies, right? Then you should be able to tell that everything I said is true. Tell me your reason. Roland's interest was piqued. The unstoppable attack from both sides will let the whole Kingdom of Dawn know your name. Even if Earl Quinn is the regent, the civilians will know who the real master behind the scenes is. When the demon's threat weakens, you can slowly influence the policy of the Kingdom of Dawn and even turn it into your fief. Under the powerful constraints of the First Army, you only need to spare a small part of your energy to achieve this. But now, this foundation is gone. The invasion of Greycastle's army and Earl Quinn's coup are essentially two different things. The latter will only greatly increase the Earl's prestige. Whether the other nobles are deterred, subdued, or secretly opposed, it has nothing to do with you. And then you just let Appin Moya and Greycastle become enemies? Nightingale questioned. Even if His Majesty doesn't do anything, it will be very difficult for him to keep the throne. At least, he won't be able to call on his vassals to work for him. After the Battle of the Old Holy City, Appin no longer has enough power and prestige to rule the kingdom. The Kingdom of Dawn will soon be in chaos. Edith's tone was as if she was stating a fact. In this chaos, Earl Quinn may still rise to the throne, but his influence will not spread throughout the kingdom. If he's lucky enough, Otto Luashi can survive. Even if he doesn't, Andrea won't blame it on you because it's not your fault, Your Majesty, she emphasized. Andrea had considered this step, which was why she had hesitated to remind Roland that the benefits you will get will be very limited. Roland was also clear about this. Compared with these gains and losses, he preferred a more stable ally. Even if Earl Quinn would not wholeheartedly support him at the beginning, the Battle of Divine Will would eliminate all the barriers between human beings. In the face of this enemy who would determine the fate of the civilization, the most important thing was to unite against the enemy. The Pearl of the Northern region should not have missed this point. In his impression, Edith was by no means a short-sighted person. Chapter 9:16. Roland looked at Edith after he expressed his thoughts. Do you really think Earl Quinn is worse than a corrupt neighboring country in charge of the Kingdom of Dawn? Edith did not look surprised at his question. In fact, I think both of them are about the same in the short term. A stable ally can provide you with resources, population, and help you in the Battle of Divine Will. This may be unpredictable for other nobles, but Earl Quinn has Andrea as his safeguard, so he's quite confident about this. Did she admit this? Roland did not understand. He thought Edith would argue that the nobles were not trustworthy. Besides, what did she mean by the short term? On the other hand, when the Kingdom of Dawn falls into chaos, it needs to be rebuilt with blood and fire, which will lead to the weakening of the kingdom. If the demons invade, the neighboring country will become like the eastern and southern borders of Grey Castle, with refugees and weeds everywhere. By then, with a little preparation, Grey Castle will have a large population. Unlike the previous situation, these people will belong to you forever. But didn't you just say that allies can provide resources and war assistance in addition to population? Nightingale said unhappily. Let's not talk about how one benefit is comparable to 3 benefits. Haven't you considered how many refugees will die helplessly in the process of migration due to lack of food and clothing? Edith said tit for tat, 3 benefits seem to be greater than 1, but there's a precondition. In order to make full use of the Allies' resources, His Majesty needs to invest certain bargaining chips, such as steam engines, golden tools, and even gunpowder and firearms. Without these, it would be impossible for the Kingdom of Dawn to fight against the demons on its own, let alone support Grey Castle on the battlefield. This was a considerable expenditure. Although it could be exchanged for more benefits, the weight of the bargaining chip could not be ignored when Neverwinter's own needs had not been met. Therefore, I think the 2 benefits are basically equal. Roland could not help but raise his eyebrows. In the entire kingdom of Grey Castle, there were very few people who could benefit from providing assistance. If it were Berev, he would definitely not agree to send his own goods and technology to neighboring countries as support. Since the benefits are basically equal, why do you still insist that the chaotic Kingdom of Dawn is better? Because of the witches, Your Majesty. Edith's answer surprised both of them. Witches? Roland was surprised. The Pearl of the Northern region stretched out a finger and said, yes, please imagine that the new Kingdom of Dawn will no longer take the persecution of witches as a matter of course. Earl Quinn will be influenced by Andrea to support witches and imitate your policies, allowing them to participate in production and construction. Without the pressure to survive, the newly awakened witches will no longer migrate to Grey Castle. This has already caused you a loss, this is the first. Secondly, the location of the Kingdom of Dawn is more advantageous than that of Grey Castle. Whether it's the demons' invasion of the Kingdom of Wolfheart and the Kingdom of Everwinter, or the Church's fugitives, all of these will push the witches to the south. Once the Kingdom of Dawn is stable, will they continue to migrate to Grey Castle? The answer is obviously not. Maybe in a few decades, the neighboring countries will have more witches than Grey Castle. Compared to the former, this trend makes me feel more uneasy. Isn't it good that everyone can live well? What's there to be uneasy about? Nightingale's tone was not as imposing as before. Edith did not look at Nightingale. Instead, she raised her head and looked directly at Roland. Have you ever thought of the possibility that one or several witches with incredible abilities can instantly change the gap between kingdoms? Like Anna. Yes, like Anna, like Agatha, like Soroya. Their abilities can be said to be incredible. The moment you had them, the gap between Neverwinter and the other nobles' territories was widened. This is also the reason why you can reach where you are today, Edith said slowly. In addition, your knowledge and vision are unparalleled. As long as you're still in power and all the members of the Witch Union remain, it'll be difficult for Grey Castle to meet any challengers except demons. She paused for a moment. But what about after that? After more than 100 years, the neighboring countries are no different from Grey Castle. Witches work in all fields, and your knowledge can't be limited to Neverwinter. They can learn how to make machines and master everything you teach. Then, as long as a witch of the Kingdom of Dawn awakens an irreplaceable ability, I'm afraid Grey Castle will fall behind. This can't. Nightingale subconsciously wanted to refute, but she stopped halfway. What's more, this is only based on the magical ability of Anna. Can you guarantee that Anna is the top of all witches? Edith asked word by word. If the other party's ability is even more amazing than Anna's, will the successor of the Kingdom of Dawn still be willing to ally with Grey Castle? Roland almost wanted to clap his hands at these words. It turned out that Edith was not thinking too far, but thinking too far. Ordinary people could only see the changes in recent years, but Edith had already set her sights on 100 years in the future. If that was all, it would not be a big deal. However, in her words, Roland actually heard a hint of technological explosion. As an experienced person, he naturally knew that the advancement of human technology was constantly increasing. From apes to bonfires, and then from steam power to the information age, a person in the modern society could witness changes that could not be seen in the past tens of thousands of years in a short lifetime. Now that witches had joined the process, this process might be further shortened. The emergence of one or two key witches was likely to lead to a technological revolution. In fact, just as the other party said, if Anna had awakened in the city of Glow instead of Border Town, it would still be a question mark how far he could go. When the members of the Witch Union grew old and new key witches appeared in the Kingdom of Dawn, the result was almost self-evident. This was also the reason why Edith insisted that if she could not control the Kingdom of Dawn, it would be better to let them fall into chaos. Roland believed that if he was a native lord, he would undoubtedly be convinced by Edith at this moment. Every king hoped that their country could last for thousands of generations and last for eternity. They also hoped that their descendants could continue to carry on their glory. For example, it was absolutely necessary to put an end to cultivating an opponent that might threaten the kingdom. It was not too late for him to change his mind. The price he had to pay was just a small breach of contract and deception, and then leave Otto to his fate. But he was not. The country that Roland cared about was not here. Apart from that, he did not care about what the kingdom would be like after his death. Compared with establishing a ruler that would last for thousands of generations, he was more inclined to see the progress of the entire human race. No matter who the successor of Grey Castle was, he had no responsibility or obligation to protect him. As long as he could improve the development of this country as much as possible and solve the mystery of the Battle of Divine Will, he would feel that this trip was not in vain. As for which of the four kingdoms would be stronger in the future, it was their own choice. Finally, there was a seemingly small but unignorable obsession in his heart. Easily erasing the agreement for the sake of benefits and turning lies into bargaining chips, when he realized this reflexive conflict, he clearly understood that he would never be able to become a real politician in this life. Wonderful deduction. Roland looked at Edith with satisfaction. But I won't take back my order. Your Majesty, Edith said in surprise. I know what you want to say. For example, a real king should put his own interests first, or that deception is common in the royal family. He interrupted her. But what I want to say is, besides the king, there are other rulers in this world. Other rulers? Edith repeated in confusion. Chapter 9:17. After dealing with the affairs of the Kingdom of Dawn, Roland returned to his residence, a manor located deep in the camp. This place should have belonged to a wealthy businessman. Not only did it have several connected two-story stone houses, but it also had a large front yard and backyard. However, Hermes's turmoil had caused the original owner to disappear, so he used this place as a temporary residence. Walking into the main room in the middle, Anna was sitting at the table, carefully reading the books he found in the dream world. Sunlight shone through the window, turning her bangs into a beautiful golden color. At the same time, it left a line of light on the outline of her fair face. Hearing the noise, she turned her head and asked with a smile, "Is the meeting over?" "Yes, I've told them everything. Nana and the others have to leave first thing in the morning. Soak your feet first." Anna got up and brought a basin of water, put it on the low stool beside the bed, and then bent over to help him take off his shoes and socks. In this era, the leather boots used on the plateau were not only hard, but also extremely airtight. Therefore, every time he returned to his bedroom, the first thing he did was to soak his feet and relax, and then put on a pair of light soft-soled cloth shoes. At first, Roland insisted on doing it himself, but in the end, he could not resist Anna's stubbornness. "How's the water temperature?" Anna sank the black fire into the water. "A little hotter." "Ah, this is just right." Feeling a warmth enveloping his feet, Roland could not help but let out a long sigh. Not only that, but the black fire would also turn into the shape of a ball and press on his insteps and soles like a massager. Finally, it would cover his entire feet and dry off any remaining water. This kind of life was really easy to indulge in. "What about you?" Anna sat down beside him. "Are you leaving with Nana tomorrow?" "No, the other person is Sylvie. Her monitoring ability is irreplaceable for the garrison." Roland held her hand. "Although I can play a role in calming people down, they will have to get used to dealing with problems on their own without me. Besides, the main force of the First Army is not in place, so my role is very limited. When Maggie is done with the two of them, it will be your turn and my turn." Since Hummingbird's ability couldn't work on living things, Maggie could only carry around 2 people at a time. The number of people that could be carried depended on the weight of the passengers. Lightning could also carry 1 person on her back, but the altitude would be greatly reduced. Basically, she could only fly close to the treetops. It was fine for emergencies, but it was too unsafe for long-distance voyages. It was a long journey from Hermes to Neverwinter. Even if Maggie could continue flying after sunset and did not have to spend time looking for food every day, it would still take her nearly 3 days to reach Neverwinter. He could only transport the witches in batches according to the urgency of the situation. Fortunately, the army would gradually advance south along the river, and the interval between each batch of personnel would be shortened accordingly. It would be great if there was a faster transportation method. Anna raised her head. "For example, a machine that can fly in the sky." "That's not easy, unless," Roland wanted to say that it was impossible to build a real aircraft without an internal combustion engine, but an idea suddenly flashed across his mind and he subconsciously changed his words. "Wait, maybe it's not impossible. How should we do it?" Anna's lake blue eyes suddenly sparkled. Using Vendi's and Mystery Moon's abilities, Roland said thoughtfully. "If it's just for carrying people, it might work if we combine the two." This was also the inspiration he got from Maggie's bombing plan. If they did not pursue mass production or versatility, the witch's ability could be equivalent to that of a machine in many ways. After 3 years of accumulation, Neverwinter now had lightweight aluminum, an arithmetic academy that could perform large-scale calculations, and a central carrier for verifying results. Therefore, a glider without power, or in other words, with weak power, was not an unattainable goal. Of course, the most important thing was Vendi's wind-controlling skill and the electric motor of Dawn Eye. To put it simply, the reason why a plane could fly was that the engine provided the backward thrust, so that the wings could move forward against the wind, and the air pressure difference between the upper and lower parts of the wings could be used to obtain lift force. According to the current technology in Neverwinter, the power of an electric motor was far from enough to pull up a plane, but he did not need to obtain lift force from the movement. Vendi's wind could directly act on the air pressure difference below the wings. The electric motor only needed to provide a portion of the horizontal force, just like how lightning adjusted the direction of a bomb in the air. She only needed to apply a small force, and the plane could soar into the air. In order to obtain an efficient hovering ability, its wings should be as long as possible. Roland became more excited as he recalled the appearance of the gliders in his previous life. But to maximize the lift force before takeoff, it must have a wide wing route that can cover the entire range of Vendi's wind controlling skill. And a well-designed glider could use thermal airflow to increase the gliding distance. However, in Neverwinter, the witches could provide upward airflow at any time, which meant that as long as the magic power was not exhausted, it could fly forever. In other words, as long as a runway was built at the destination, the glider could carry 10 or more people at once. Even the slowest glider had a speed of more than 200 km per hour, which was almost 3 times the speed of Maggie after transforming into a devil beast. It could reach any city in Grey Castle within a day. Of course, whether it was the prototype manufacturing or the pilot training, it was a step-by-step process. Even if they started now, by the time they could fly, the witches and the First Army would have already returned to Neverwinter. However, this idea still excited them for a long time. Flying had always been the biggest temptation for humans who were born and died on the ground. Unlike the clumsy hydrogen balloon, the glider could truly soar with the wind. If Edith could surprise Roland in terms of governance, the only one who could communicate with him on the same level in terms of technology was Anna. By the way, she carefully put away the results of the discussion and the model sketch. Did you hear any good news in today's meeting? You haven't been so relaxed since you received the letter from Neverwinter. Sort of. Roland smiled and briefly told her about the private meeting with the Pearl of the Northern Region. When she heard Edith's reason, Anna could not help laughing. What's wrong? Roland asked curiously. I want to say that she's a little too confident in everyone. Learn everything you've taught them. It's already difficult to learn advanced mathematics, not to mention physics and chemistry. Anna made a face. I don't think I can understand all those orange books even if I spend 100 years. Ha! Roland also laughed. There are many books like this in the dream world. And I don't think the world will be like what she said. Oh. What do you think it will be like? Chapter 9:18. Of course not. Roland tapped her forehead affectionately. And this idea is very much like your style. Then why are you happy about Edith's words? Anna was puzzled. What I'm glad about isn't her speculations, because history itself is full of all kinds of possibilities, Roland said with a smile. It's hard enough to see the past clearly, let alone predict the future. For example, the third battle of Divine Will may be successfully passed, but the fourth battle of Divine Will be completely destroyed a few hundred years later. Or, the enemies hiding in the sea are far more powerful than we can imagine, and the people on land can only be separated, surrounded, and destroyed. At that time, not to mention the immortality of the kingdom, even the continuation of the human race will be a problem. This guess is indeed your style, Anna said, mimicking his tone. Then why are you so happy? From her perspective, Roland spread out his hands. When she said those words, Edith had already changed from a noble official to a state official. State officials. Anna repeated this somewhat awkward word. That's right. She's no longer looking at the northern region. Instead, she's looking at Grey Castle as a whole. It's very rare for people in this era to speculate on the direction of the kingdom as a whole. Even Berev can't do this. In the mind of the City Hall director, he always weighs the gains and losses from the perspective of Neverwinter. This was a drastic change. From the beginning, Edith Kant still considered herself a member of the nobility in the north. Her words and deeds, as well as her advice, were not only to assist her superiors, but also to fight for benefits for the north. This was the most common thought among the feudal nobles. They believed that only the territory where their family resided was their only home. Even if they were loyal to the king, the interests of the territory were above the king's orders. There's another point, which is her view of witches. Roland went on to say, being able to comprehend witches can bring about a leap in technology, and from this point alone, it can be seen that she is ahead of most people. Following orders on the surface and knowing the reason for doing so were two completely different things. Although Roland had mentioned in his textbook that technology was the primary productive force and witches were the best catalysts for technology, most of the city hall officials did not understand the significance of giving preferential treatment to witches. They only did so because of His Majesty's order. The common people also didn't understand that they were getting along well with the witches because some of the witches had brought convenience to their lives, nothing more. This coexistence was as fragile as a layer of bubble. When there was a major conflict or setback, it was extremely easy for both sides to regress. Only when the idea that witches were indispensable was deeply rooted in people's hearts could this problem be fundamentally solved. It could be said that this point satisfied Roland even more than the former. After all, with the acceleration of centralization of power and the disappearance of feudal differences, more and more officials would accept the idea of one country, one rule. However, it would probably take a long time for them to understand the nature of witches' ability. Of course, Edith was not without shortcomings. Although her vision was better than most people's, it was still not ahead of the times. In her mind, she still envisioned an immortal Greycastle kingdom. However, considering that she was now about the same age as Nightingale, it was not surprising that she had such an idea. Roland was looking forward to what kind of consul she would become in 20 or 30 years under his guidance. After the general explanation, Anna tilted her head and said, "Since the future is unpredictable and you're not thinking about Greycastle after you die, what do you plan to do if we survive the Battle of Divine Will?" "You already know, don't you?" Roland stared at her rippling eyes and said. Similar topics had been mentioned more than once during the night when they hugged each other to sleep. Crossing the fertile plains to go to the land of dawn and even to the demon's territory, crossing the Sealine and leaving human footprints on the other side of the sea, unveiling the veil of God and understanding the truth of this world. For this purpose, he would use all available resources, not only the kingdom of Greycastle, but also everyone living on this continent would contribute to this exploration. Any stubborn person who tried to stop him would be his enemy. "Remember to take me with you." Anna grinned and said, "I don't want to miss such a scene." "Yes, I'll definitely go with you, even if it means going to the end of the world." Roland kissed her lips. City of Neverwinter, 3rd Border City. Tilly guarded in front of the magic core, watching its every change. The surging magic power was like the blue sea, causing the outer skeleton to expand and contract rhythmically, as if it was breathing. A yellow ball of light flashed in the center of the pyramid, like a gem washed by waves. At the same time, it attracted all her attention. As long as the ball of light was still shining, it meant that the 5-colored magic stone was still intact. "If you're tired, it's better to take a rest." Suddenly, Pasha's words rang in her mind, and at the same time, she heard a rustling sound behind her. "If there's any news here, I'll inform you immediately." Tilly turned around and saw a huge sarcoma hanging down from the top of her head. Although the transformed senior witches all looked the same, after these days of getting along with them, she found that she could faintly tell the difference between them. "I'm not tired. It's only been 5 days." She could not help but yawn. "I'm just a little sleepy. When I'm still conscious, there's no difference between sleepiness and fatigue." Pasha waved her tentacles. "Don't worry, the magic stone is not broken, which means that the witches are still safe. If they really encounter demons, they will definitely crush the stone." Tilly also understood this, but she still couldn't feel at ease. "If I had known this would happen, I would have gone with them," she thought with some annoyance. She did not expect that she would be persuaded by that idiot Ashes. In theory, this trip would not be too dangerous. The selected witches were all outstanding witches who had fought against the church, and the way they sneaked in was similar to the way they attacked the church at the fjords. Lotus was responsible for creating a sinking hole in the ground, and then using the track to open up a short distance passage, so that everyone could go back and forth between the two holes in the blink of an eye. For the enemy, even if they found something strange underground, they would only be able to see a closed hole after digging up the soil. The key was the last step. In order to give the phantom instrument a wider field of vision, the position where the magic stone was crushed should be as high as possible. Tilly originally planned to use the Stone of Flight to complete the positioning, but in the end, Ashes took over the task. Chapter 9:19. I used to be like you. After a moment of silence, Pasha suddenly said, every time my companions went to war, I would guard the city gate. The Union also built a tower there for everyone to rest. If a team came back, we would know immediately. Do you mean tequila? Tilly asked. Yes, but a few years later, except for the garrison, few people went there. Do you know why? She did not answer, but she had already guessed the answer in her heart. Because in the end, we always get disappointed and sad. Pasha put her tentacles on Wendy's shoulder. The recognition between witches is beyond the bloodline. It's the magic power that connects us. Whether it's an ordinary combat witch or a member of the blessed army, as long as we get along for a while, most of us will become like brothers. However, this kind of relationship also filled the tower with negative emotions, especially when they waited for the day of return, only to see corpses being transported back. When the outer defense line was gradually reduced and no one needed to go to war anymore, the Union ordered the tower to be demolished. Are you trying to say that waiting is unnecessary? On the contrary, what I want to say is, don't be resistant to waiting, because it proves that you haven't really experienced the feeling of loss. Pasha's tone was slow and gentle. I also hope that you will never become like me, indifferent to sacrifice as a normal thing. I have lost before. Whether it was when I left the palace or went to Sleeping Island, I made many decisions. Many of them were about gains and losses, and I even gave up some of my own kind. As long as I can walk in the right direction, I won't hesitate too much. But some people are different. There are always one or two special people who make me upset. Tilly grasped the lightning magic stone ring in her hand. If it was her, she could easily control the two magic stones alternately. However, Ashes could only fly up and down in a straight line, so the ring was left in her hand. But she did not say these thoughts out loud. She just nodded slightly and said, "Thank you." "You're welcome. I'm going to check the progress of the defense line. There's a lounge at the entrance of the hall. If you want to sleep, you can go there anytime." "I see." After Pasha left, Tilly suddenly felt a chill in her palm. She opened her hand and saw that a corner of the magic stone fixed on the ring had been peeled off and pierced into her skin, leaving behind a tiny drop of blood. "Today is the 5th day, why haven't I seen the shadow of the ruins yet?" Lotus muttered, "I've been cooped up underground every day, I'm going to go moldy." "How should I know?" "Anyway, I'll go wherever you dig." A girl with a head full of braids shrugged and threw a piece of jerky into the air. She then opened her mouth and saw the jerky disappear in a flash of blue light. Her cheeks puffed up. Well, life in Neverwinter is indeed a well-deserved reputation. Even the dried food here is so delicious. Hole. Do you take me for a mole? It's more or less the same. Well, you'd better eat sparingly. Iffy sighed. I don't want to go hungry when I go back. Humph, I don't want to listen to the witches of the Blood Fang Association either. Iffy tilted her head and said, I heard that you guys once had designs on Her Highness Tilly. If it were me, I wouldn't even give you wheat cakes, let alone jerky. Iffy immediately rolled her eyes. Enough, Ashes said helplessly. It's not their fault to join the Blood Fang Association. If Tilly hears this, she'll definitely teach you a lesson. Okay. She only calmed down when Iffy mentioned Princess Tilly. Another one with too much energy. Ashes sighed in her heart. Judging from her appearance, this troublesome witch was Orbit, but she was an indispensable part of this operation. Orbit's ability was incredible. Before she was an adult, she could use magic power to create an invisible passage connecting two places. The passage could not be seen by the naked eye and had no distance. In other words, she could go from one place to another in an instant. If there was a door or wall between the two places, orbit would suddenly disappear. As long as her ability was not interrupted, the passage would always exist. However, the range of magic power still existed. The distance between the two places could not exceed 20 steps. If she used herself as the starting point, the distance would be shortened to 10 steps. After she became an adult, Orbit's awakened branch ability, Magic Imprint, greatly increased the practicality and range of application of the passage. By giving the imprint, she could let others see and use the passage. People without the imprint could not stop her from moving freely even if they knew where the passage was. Of course, this ability also had a certain degree of danger. For example, if the enemy entered the passage after giving the imprint, she could cancel the ability before the enemy completely crossed the passage. Then, she would get two halves of her body in two different places. Relying on the cooperation between Lotus and Orbit, she could open up a bridge-like passage in the underground without anyone noticing. This was exactly the plan formulated by Tilly. Even if the enemy could find a hole in the ground, they would not be able to locate the witches through it. By the time the demons realized that there were many such holes, they would have already escaped several miles away. Therefore, in theory, it was an absolutely safe plan. The route of the group of people's movement was starting from the concealing forest. Using Agatha's stone tower as the starting point, they would move northeast. The advantage was that the forest near Neverwinter was completely under Leaf's control, so they did not have to worry about the threat of demonic hybrids. However, when it came to actual operation, Ashes found a thorny problem. During the practice, the distance of a few hundred feet was almost the same, but after the distance was stretched dozens of times, it was difficult for them to confirm their position. Although they corrected the direction through the stars every night, in the end, no one knew whether it was correct or not. Should we check the map that Lorgar brought back? Lotus looked at Ashes. Maybe we can find one or two landmark locations. As long as we can determine the location, we can know how far the ruins are from us. Ashes nodded, but in her heart, she did not have much hope. Were the bird nests, beehives, and bear caves drawn on the map really used to point the way? Perhaps only Lightning and Maggie could find the right direction according to the map. Sure. Ify suddenly made a gesture to keep quiet. The three of them immediately quieted down. Soon, they heard heavy footsteps coming from above. The footsteps were very messy, indicating that there were at least 4 or 5 people. Considering that demonic hybrids rarely moved in groups, the source of the sound was very likely to be the demons' patrol team. After a while, the footsteps were far away from them. Obviously, the enemies did not notice the mystery hidden underground. This was the second time today. Probably, the attack of the wolf girls had made them increase the number of guards. Ify did not breathe a sigh of relief until the sound completely disappeared. At least this proves that we're in the right general direction. The problem is that we can't accurately place the light curtain without seeing the ruins of the city. Lotus shook her head. If we want to use the phantom instrument as a warning, the light curtain should be 5 or 6 miles southwest of the ruins. In this way, as long as there are devil beasts flying to the western region, they will be seen by the Tequila witches. Chapter 920. The demons aren't blind. Ify immediately objected. You can see the Tequila with the help of the setting sun, so they can definitely see you. Do you want to be a live target without any cover in the air? I also think it's too risky, Lotus added. Lady Tilly said you can only fly up and down with the stone of flight. If you're discovered, you won't be able to escape. Can't we go up and have a look in the middle of the night? Hearing their advice, especially the Bloodfang Association's witches, Ashes felt a little emotional. A year ago, they were still enemies. Heidi Morgan even wanted to kill her and Tilly. If it were not for Tilly's insistence on forbearance, Ashes would have already attacked the Bloodfang Association. She had thought that this was an unresolvable rift on Sleeping Island, but she did not expect that things would take such a turn. Now, they were on the same side. Moreover, the tactics she envisioned also needed everyone's cooperation to be realized. We can't see anything except darkness at night. The ruins are now overgrown with vines. Without enough light, it's hard to find where it is. Therefore, dusk is the best time. Ashes insisted. Maybe we didn't deviate from the predetermined direction. The ruins may be behind a dense forest or a low slope. All I need to do is fly up and crush the magic stone. What if some flying demons find you? Lotus frowned. I'm afraid you can't even use 1/10 of your fighting ability in the air, right? As for the countermeasures, I've already figured them out. Ashes held up 3 fingers calmly. According to different situations, I have 3 plans. Oh. Orbit came over curiously. Isn't this what Lady Tilly always said? Really? Lotus's expression changed a little. Tell me about it. Listen carefully. During the observation period in the air, the only devil beasts that can find me are mad demons. Therefore, the 3 situations are, 1 devil beast, 2 devil beasts, and 3 devil beasts. If there are more than 3 devil beasts, I'll deal with it as 3 devil beasts. This way, I'll be absolutely safe. Oh my. Lotus covered her forehead helplessly. Even Iffy could not help but laugh. Hey, aren't you guys going to listen to the specific battle plan for the 3 situations before expressing your opinion? If I were Maggie, I would definitely raise both my hands in approval, Orbit said seriously. Now I finally know why that guy used to like working with you the most. But in the end, Ashes still managed to convince everyone. According to Lotus, although the first half of the hypothesis sounded very unreliable, the countermeasures were surprisingly good. Iffy's view was, the instinct of a beast accumulated through thousands of battles. Of course, the most important thing was that they could not think of a better solution. After continuing to travel underground for a day, the light seen through the ventilation holes had gradually dimmed. The pure white clouds seemed to have been ignited, merging into one with the dim yellow dome. Obviously, the sun was gradually disappearing into the end of the fertile plains. It was time to act according to plan. As Orbit left a mark on Ashes, a blue, light spot appeared out of thin air above her head. It looked like a puddle, with soft light swaying in the water. It was as if the 3 of them were standing under the water, looking up at the blue sky above the water through the undulating ripples. Ashes knew that this was just the inherent shape of the passage, and not the real scene at the other end. After confirming that there were no demon patrols around the hiding place, she nodded to the 3 of them and poured her magic into the ring. Then, an indescribable feeling surrounded her, as if she had an extra hand or a foot, and Tilly called it wings. If one had never tried flying, one would naturally not know how a bird felt. One could only imagine the difficulty of controlling a part that did not belong to oneself. In fact, the only person on Sleeping Island who could use the stone of flight so naturally was Tilly. Ashes closed her eyes, imagined herself flapping her wings and then leaping up. In an instant, fresh air hit her face, and she heard the rustling of the trees. In addition, there were the cries of birds returning to their nests, the buzzing of insects, and the whistling of the evening wind. The unchanging underground space suddenly became very rich. She opened her eyes, and the whole world suddenly became bright. The earth quickly shrank under her feet, and the exit of the passage soon turned into a tiny light spot. This kind of feeling, maybe it's not bad to experience it once in a while. Ashes stopped enjoying the scenery and looked to the north. Her heart suddenly sank. Even as far as the eye could see, she did not find a place that looked like a ruin, let alone the skeleton monster that the wolf girl had mentioned. There was nothing except the undergrowth and grass that were dyed red by the afterglow. Are we looking in the wrong direction? She turned around, trying to determine her current position from the direction of the impassable mountain range, but she was suddenly startled. She saw that in the southeast of the forest, there were several huge behemoths, and they were only a few miles away from her. And under those obviously unnatural demonic creations was a broken wall. It was the ruins of the holy city of Tequila. It turned out that they did not go far enough, but the accumulated deviation caused them to cross the ruins from the east. If placed on the map, this position and the predetermined route would only be 1 or 2 degrees, but in reality, the deviation was the difference between the front and the back of Tequila. If she turned around and headed south now, it would probably take her another 2 or 3 days. She could also fly directly to the south, complete the positioning, and then fly back, which would only take half a day at most, but except for straight up and down, she had never tried to fly horizontally. What should I do? However, before Ashes could make a decision, a dull horn sound came from the direction of Tequila. With this sound, a dozen devil beasts suddenly jumped up from the skeleton monster and rushed toward her position. At the same time, a dark mass of mad demons drilled out of the land around the ruins and surrounded the holy city. Well, it seems that they are quite vigilant, Lin Sanjiu thought to herself. If there were more than 3, it would be counted as 3. This seemed to be the worst-case scenario. Without hesitation, Ashes took out the 5-colored magic stone and crushed it into powder. Then, she jumped down from the sky. The most important ability of a warrior was to judge the situation and then make corresponding countermeasures, capture 1 devil beast alive, kill 2 devil beasts, and retreat when there were 3 or more devil beasts. It was not because she was not confident that she could deal with so many demons, but because she could not make sure that they would all shut up before they sounded the alarm. As for the current situation, there was no doubt that the risk of using the broken bridge to approach the ruins of Tequila had greatly increased. Therefore, although the position was not very ideal, she had to give up. Indeed, she was not as talented as Tilly, who could control the wings, as if they were her own arms, but she had her own way to fly faster. That was to instill more magic power into the magic stone. With the continuous increase of magic power, Ashes could feel that the invisible wings on her back had expanded to the limit. Every time they flapped in her imagination, a gust of wind would be stirred up. She fell to the ground almost as fast as lightning. Her speed was 3 or 4 times faster than when she rose up. Even the mad demon's accurate spear throw could not hurt her in such a state. However, the extremely high speed brought about a great momentum. Due to the length of the passage, Lotus could at most create a hole that was 10 steps high. With such a short distance, it was impossible for her to stop the momentum on her own. The only thing she could do now was to trust her companions. After a short while, the blue light spot that symbolized the entrance of the passage appeared in front of Ashes again along with the rapidly approaching ground. She crossed her hands over her head, tightened her muscles, and plunged straight into the passage. Almost at the same time, several purple halos appeared out of nowhere and firmly bound her. It was Iffy's magic prison. Her falling speed was reduced in an instant. When she completely stopped, her hands were only an arm's length away from the ground. "You're really heavy," Iffy said with a shrug, still holding her hands. "Now do you know where we are?" Chapter 921. 3 days later, when Tilly saw the exhausted faces of the 4 people, her heart that had been hanging in suspense finally calmed down. Judging from their disheveled faces and their forced smiles, it was obvious that the journey had been a safe one despite the many accidents and thrills. They were lucky enough to escape unscathed after going in the wrong direction and being discovered by a large number of demons. But looking at the unrepentant Ashes, her heart was filled with anger. Even the comforting words on the tip of her tongue turned into a stiff rebuke. "I didn't expect someone who claimed to be a veteran in the wild couldn't even tell the direction," Princess Tilly said angrily. "How did you run from Hermes to the king's city of Grey Castle? It's really strange that he didn't stray straight to the southernmost region." At that time, there were often pursuers from the church. "We'll know once we catch them and interrogate them." Ashes spread out her hands. "And this time, I don't think it's too far off. At least we can see the Tequila ruins. If they're out on a large scale, they should be able to notice. Without enough red mist, they won't be able to move out in large numbers. What we need to guard against is the surprise attack of the devil beasts, and from this perspective, we can only see their tails. It would be ideal if everyone is safe and sound, and this position might not be as bad as we thought. His Majesty sent back the first batch of witches yesterday, and Sylvie was one of them. If we can solve the problem of early warning, this rear view can help us determine the size of the enemy and their reinforcements. So, please go back and have a good rest. Oh. Is there any news from the northern lands? Ashes raised her eyebrows. Otherwise, it won't be as simple as me scolding you. Tilly snorted. Seriously. Let's go. Wait, Ashes paused and glanced at Pasha first. Then, a faint smile appeared on her face before she rushed over to Pasha. What happened? No, nothing. Ashes curled her lips. Back at the witch building, as soon as Tilly closed the door, she was hugged from behind. Sorry to make you worry. Did Pasha tell you that? Tilly asked without turning her head. You guessed it. The latter froze for a moment. Looking at your expression, I know what's going on. She pushed Ash's arm away and said, if I'm not mistaken, Pasha must be saying that I haven't had a good rest these days and I've been guarding the magic core most of the time. She's asking you not to mind my attitude and to comfort me when you come back. Amazing, you got everything right. Ashes sighed in amazement. Well, what about the apology? She turned around. No. The extraordinary shook her head. No. Tilly's eyes widened. So it's right for me to worry. No matter what, I can't let you go to danger yourself. This is the decision I made a long time ago. Ashes, you don't understand anything. Tilly suddenly gnashed her teeth in anger. Risks can be calculated, measured, and avoided. The executor is part of it. No matter how perfect the plan is, a bad executor will make the situation a mess. Do you understand? If it were me, the broken bridge operation wouldn't be dangerous at all. Calculation, measurement, avoidance. You're becoming more and more like Roland Wimbledon, Ashes said with a shrug. Don't change the subject. Princess Tilly was unmoved. Isn't that the truth? But accidents can't be predicted. Even if the probability of it happening is very small, I still want to be the one to bear it. After all, there are too many accidents in my life. Ashes leaned over and put her hands on Tilly's shoulders. Because of the height difference, this was the only way she could look at Tilly at the same level. You have a good reason not to apologize. Since I've chosen to stay here and fight the demons, I'll be in danger more and more often. If I can't come back, won't I owe a lot of apologies? Hey! Listen to me. Ashes's expression was extremely serious. Compared to your brother, there's not much I can do. It's too difficult for me to think about the future of witches. So this is the only thing I'm sure is right. If you're willing to return to Sleeping Island, I can promise that I won't let you worry anymore. But not here. Of course, if you make me worry, I won't let you apologize. Tilly found that she didn't know what to say. Looking at the black-haired and golden-eyed Ashes, she felt that she was inexplicably reliable at this moment. It shouldn't be like this. Ahem. She tilted her head. Forget it this time. Tell me the whole thing in detail later. I want to find out what the problem is. Now go take a bath. The smell on your body is killing me. I know. Ashes let out a long breath. Do you want to take a bath with me? No way. Looking at the extraordinary leaving, Tilly stretched out her right hand and opened her palm. The place where the ring had pierced her hand had completely healed. There was almost no trace of the injury, but the sudden stinging pain was still fresh in her memory. Fortunately, the situation she worried about did not happen. Maybe I'm just worrying too much, she thought. When Lorgar woke up from a long sleep, she felt an indescribable comfort all over her body. It was like soaking in a warm spring. The dizziness and pain were gone. Yes, Nana Pine is back. She vaguely remembered what happened before she fell asleep. The lovely little girl ran into the room breathlessly. It seemed that she hadn't rested all the way. The first thing she said when she saw her was, "Sleep well. You'll be back to normal when you wake up." In addition to her, there were also her companions in the adventurer group. They talked a lot at the bedside, but she couldn't remember a single word. After all, the feeling when Nana's magic flowed through her body was too comfortable. So now I'm all right. I have to thank her. When Lorgar opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was a gray-haired man. She was stunned. Great, Chief. That's me. Roland nodded. How does it feel to be healed? I can't tell. She tried to move her fingers. It was a little jerky, but her thoughts were conveyed without any hindrance. There seems to be no problem. How long did I sleep? Where's Nana? And your hand. Oh, I just found it interesting. Don't worry about it. Roland withdrew his hand from Lorgar's ear. I've always been curious about how they feel when I touch them. Do they make you feel, especially itchy? No, they're just ears, Lorgar said strangely. If you don't mind them being weird, I'm fine with it. After saying that, she even shook her long ears. That's enough for now. The chief coughed twice. You've slept for about 3 days. This is the normal time for your body to adapt after recovering from serious injuries. Of course, it doesn't matter if you don't sleep. You'll just feel extra tired and uncomfortable. Lorgar was slightly surprised. 3 days, if nightfall didn't remove the seed of symbiosis, you could have slept longer. Roland smiled. You woke up because your body reminded you. You should feel hungry later. Oh, and Miss Nightfall. I have to go and thank them. The wolf girl wanted to get up, but Roland gently pressed her down. Chapter 922. Now do you agree that I have the ability to fight against the demons? Lorgar suddenly became spirited. I've never denied that you're qualified to fight against them. In fact, even a weak, ordinary woman will participate in this huge war behind the defense line, Roland reiterated. What I'm against is fighting against them alone. If the Sleeping Island witches had come a little later this time, without the seed of symbiosis with Nightfall, I'm afraid you would have been buried in the Western Cemetery. But if I didn't do that, Neverwinter wouldn't have discovered the demon army, Lorgar stubbornly said. I can reward you for a good result, but I can't affirm the wrong approach just because of a good result. Roland shook his head. The best thing you did was to bring the news back to Neverwinter instead of staying in the barbarian land to fight against the demons. If you were to ask me the same question now, my answer would still be no. I don't want you to fight the devil alone, and this time I'll make the guards watch you more closely, so that you won't come back half dead again. Huh? This is the chief's order. Roland was not swayed. Let's talk about the reward first. The great chieftain's expression wasn't this serious when he touched her ear just now. All right then. There are 3 kinds of rewards. You can choose one. Simply put, it's a golden dragon, chaos drinks and a custom-made equipment. The first 2 were easy to understand, but what was the last one? Was it an iron claw or a steel tooth specially for the wolf form? She had considered this problem when she was in the Wild Flame clan, but she had to change back to her original form, and those custom-made weapons would easily become a burden. Lorgar asked the question in her mind. I haven't figured out the specific plan yet, but it's generally a powerful firearm that can greatly improve your fighting ability. Roland explained, I heard from Ashes that you can keep part of your body in the wolf form, and in this case, your strength is equivalent to half of a god's punishment warrior. This set of equipment is specially designed for god's punishment witches, but I think it will also be useful for you. Was he talking about the weapons used by the first army that had easily defeated the Oasis watchdogs? She remembered that lightning also had one. Its power was indeed amazing, but it also depended on the ability of the user. Moreover, the crossbow used was very special and could only be produced in Neverwinter. According to what the great chieftain had said, since she was not allowed to leave the city alone, he would definitely not give her the corresponding crossbow. If she only had the firearm itself, it could only be placed in the house and not be of much use. More importantly, she trusted her own body and fangs more than external forces. Can I choose to join the Witch Union? Lorgar asked after thinking for a moment. The other party probably didn't expect such an answer from her. Slightly stunned, he said, "But I can, but weren't you? I changed my mind." The wolf girl wagged her tail. "The golden dragon will run out one day, and the chaos drinks will run out one day. I'm not good at anything except fighting, so it's better for me to join the witch union. If I become a member of the union, I'll get the golden dragon and chaos drinks every month, right?" Yes, that's right. In addition, I've promised Lightning and Maggie that I'll explore the entire barbarian land with them. Since they're all members of the witch union, it'll be more convenient for me to join them. By the way, if I go with them, you won't stop me from going into the depths of the barbarian land, right? Ahem, in theory, yes, but I still have to prioritize safety. Then this is the reward I want, Lorgar said with her head held high. After all, I once refused your kindness. Phew. Roland finally spread out his hands. If you've decided. Yes, do I need to sign a contract? She looked serious. Of course. Vendi will explain everything to you later. The great chief stood up. I'll ask the kitchen to send you something to eat. Have a good rest. As for thanking Nana and the others, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. Watching him leave, Lorgar lowered her ears and lay back on the pillow. There was one thing she didn't explain to the great chief. The golden dragon and the chaos drinks were not the key. The main reason why she decided to join the witch union was the hidden secret in her heart. For the Sand Nation, facts spoke louder than words. She had always suspected that Roland wouldn't fulfill his promise to the Majins, and it was difficult for her to completely trust a noble from the Northern Kingdom. If he broke his promise, she would eventually return to Wildflame and become an enemy of the Northern Kingdom. Therefore, Lorgar was quite resistant to the great chief's words, and she didn't think he would really care about a divine lady of a foreign race. Later, although the resistance gradually subsided, her doubts still existed. Until this serious injury. During the symbiosis period, she was told that the witch union had sent many letters of help to Roland Wimbledon. As long as she persisted for a while, she would be able to get treatment from Miss Nana. However, when she learned that the great chief was now in the northern region of Greycastle, busy recovering his territory, she didn't have much hope. The Northern Kingdom was several times larger than the southernmost region. It was an extremely long journey from Iron Sand City to Endless Cape, let alone from the northern border to Neverwinter. Even if it was to deal with the demons, it would take at least 1 or 2 months. However, the great chief had sent Nana back, and she was the first witch to be sent back. Lorgar knew how important a healer was to the army. It would be too harsh to say that he didn't care about this treatment. Besides, if she remembered correctly, even Maggie needed about 3 days to go back and forth from the northern region. If the great chief didn't lie to her, it meant that he came to see her as soon as he arrived in Neverwinter. In the southernmost region, this kind of kindness was worthy of any warrior's loyalty. She wasn't a pure warrior, but a pure Majin Sandman. Since that was the case, why not trust him more? After leaving the bedroom, Roland went straight downstairs and went straight to the reception hall on the first floor. The guards at the door pushed open the door. The hall was already full of people. When they saw the king, they all stood up in unison. Before he arrived at the western region, Lightning had brought the summon order to Neverwinter. He looked at the people's expressions as he slowly walked to the main seat. The ministers of the city hall, the person in charge of the garrison force of the First Army, the representatives of the Witch Union, the representatives of the Sleeping Spell, the manager of the Longsong area, and the Tequila Witches all had different expressions on their faces. Some of them were confused about the enemy, some of them hated the demons, but most of them looked serious and solemn. Chapter 923. Not until Roland sat down did the others bow and take their seats. From the remote town to the rapidly expanding core city, Roland had become a flag in everyone's mind. He could clearly feel this in the eyes of the participants. Unlike the time when they stood on the platform in elementary school and gave speeches or explained plans to clients, they were not only listening but also preparing. They were ready to carry out his every order and intention. This was the team he had accumulated after coming to this world for 3 years. Whenever he thought of the lonely figures in the castle at the beginning, as well as the taunts and sneers of the local nobles, he felt a sincere sense of satisfaction from the bottom of his heart. Neverwinter can't allow the demons to take root on the fertile plains, especially in a place so close to the border. Although the demons came a little early, we didn't slow down either. Grey Castle has basically been pacified, so we can focus on dealing with them. Roland went straight to the point and said, Neverwinter can't allow the demons to take root on the fertile plains, especially in a place so close to the border. He paused, looked around, and said word by word, our next goal is to drive the demons out of the Tequila ruins. Do you have any questions? Yes, Your Majesty. Everyone said in unison. Even Barav, who was the most concerned about mobilizing the army, did not raise any objection. The rapid development of Neverwinter was based on the stable order and the confidence of the people. A city protected by a powerful king and a territory that had never been invaded by war were the main factors that attracted the refugees to come to Neverwinter. If the demons used the Tequila ruins as a stronghold and constantly harassed Neverwinter, causing panic and even causing people to flee, the future development of Neverwinter would be impossible. The eastern and southern regions, which had been abandoned because of the continuous battles for the throne, were the best proof. Then let's talk about the specific plan. If any department has any ideas, please speak. Your Majesty, I think the most important thing now is to move the industries in the north as soon as possible. Barav was the first to stand up and reply. If the demons invade the western region, the first people to be affected will be those who are not protected by the city wall. Even if the new city wall is built, the cattle and sheep grazing will still disturb your army. The previous city-wide alert is an example. Speaking of this, he glanced at Vendi. Due to the closure of the city gate, the transportation of wheat seeds and a variety of forest resources was blocked. Fortunately, the city hall was operating at full capacity, so the impact was minimized. Roland had already found out about this matter from the letter. When he heard the old manager mention it again, he couldn't help but look at Vendi. He noticed that the latter had a calm expression and didn't have the slightest intention to argue. Obviously, the words "I'll take full responsibility" weren't said out of anger. Wheat seeds, mushrooms, and other resources can be collected by paddle steamers and transported into the city from the west side of the Redwater River, but the North Slope mine can't be moved, and the cost of rebuilding the furnace district is too high, so it can't be generalized. He thought for a moment and said, these places will be heavily guarded, so that they will be able to resist the Devil Beast's surprise attacks. Also, I didn't explain in detail about the alert. Now, I'll make it clear that the evacuation during the martial law is only for the people still wandering in the streets, markets, and other places, not all residents. From today on, I request that no factory will stop working under any circumstances until I give new orders. Then, I'll count the industries that can be moved and give them to you for review. Probably realizing that Roland didn't want to hold him responsible, Barav immediately changed his tone. Also, plan the new land. Roland tapped on the map behind him. The threat from the Great Snow Mountain has been eliminated, so the area in the west can be used. As long as Leaf is here, the misty forest will be a natural barrier for the left wing. On the map, the dense misty forest was like an inverted triangle, occupying a small part of the barbarian land. Its apex was the Snow Mountain in the western region. One side extended along the foot of the mountain to the north, leading to Dragon's Pine Ridge, and the other side accompanied the Redwater River to the border of Neverwinter. These two ends were connected, forming a huge buffer zone. To put it simply, if the barbarian land was divided into 3 parts, the leftmost part would be the forest area, while the rightmost part would be the Neverwinter grassland and the impassable mountain range. The area under Leaf's control now covered the entire western section of the Redwater River, so the safety of the cement fleet could be guaranteed, whether it was transporting coal or forest resources. Yes, Your Majesty. Barav was also aware of this point, so he quickly agreed. Your Majesty, I think the origin of the demons should be made public to the people as soon as possible, Vendi said. Otherwise, when they suddenly appear in front of everyone, it will easily cause panic. And you often say that propaganda is the most important part of governance. If we don't control it, it's very likely that some people with ulterior motives will take advantage of it. I also agree with this statement, Urcha echoed through the light screen. Although the abilities of mortals are very limited, when put together, it is still a force. At least it is better than nothing. Besides, fear is like a whip, it often makes people afraid, but when it's waved properly, it can force people to move forward. Originally, the propaganda work would be carried out after the unification of Grey Castle and the king's ascension to the throne, but the demon's early appearance disrupted this plan. Roland threw this task to Berev. You decide the content of the propaganda and how to do it. Make sure the people understand that the demons are the mortal enemies of mankind and we won't stop until we are destroyed. At the same time, emphasize that they are just like demonic beasts. Although they look ferocious and scary, they are no different from guns. As for those who take advantage of the situation to spread rumors and create chaos, Roland sneered and looked at the two people in charge of the police department, Vader and Ren Med. I don't think I need to remind you how to deal with them, right? The two hurriedly lowered their heads. Of course, Your Majesty. After confirming the wartime order and relevant plans in Neverwinter, Pasha brought up the question that everyone was most concerned about. How do you plan to attack the demons near the Tequila ruins? The safest way is to set up artillery positions and destroy their red mist supply devices from a distance. Roland roughly measured on the map with his finger. The Longsong cannons produced now have a shooting range of more than 10 kilometers. If we improve them a little, they can shoot even farther. Without the red mist, the demons who stay here will die. He was not bragging. Considering the use and transportation conditions of the first generation of Longsong cannon, except for the glorious 152mm caliber, the other standards were far lower than the 152mm caliber. Even if he did not modify the barrel, carriage and other parts, he only needed to enlarge the chamber and replace the whole cartridge with the small cartridge to immediately increase the shooting range. I see. The Tequila witches are willing to open up this position for you. There was no doubt that the Tequila camp was the most enthusiastic about the Battle of Divine Will in the conference hall. As long as they could defeat the demons, they did not mind taking the lead. Chapter 924. In the North Slope mine of Neverwinter. A new road connecting the ore yard and the furnace area was undergoing the final cleaning. Different from the ironclad wooden rails in the mine, it was not only wider, but also wider. In particular, the two rails were all made of steel, so one could imagine how heavy it was just by looking at it. If it were any other lord, he would definitely be shocked by such a waste. How many sets of armor and swords would it take to forge so much iron? Even if it was a conservative estimate, it was enough to arm a sizable group of knights. But now, it was buried in the ground, exposed to the wind and rain, rusting and gathering dust. What a spendthrift! When Roland led the participants into the yard, there was a commotion in the crowd. Not every department knew the ins and outs of the new road, especially the officials from the Longsong area. They opened their mouths in surprise and could not take their eyes off the straight rails. The natural uniformity of the rails always gave people a silent power. Even if they did not understand its function, they would still be subdued by its power. After several years of shock training, they did not think that their king was a spendthrift, but the way he did it still made most of the participants tremble. At first glance, laying the cast steel bars on the ground was no different from using Golden Dragon to pave the road. That was the best material. As long as it was transported out, it could be exchanged for a lot of money in any city. In fact, only Neverwinter could afford such a consumption. Since the official production of blast furnace iron making and converter steel making, the cornerstone of all industries, iron and steel smelting had finally achieved, witch-like, to a certain extent. Although the latter needed Anna to start the ignition, compared to the original Star of Steel, this production process could be regarded as a miracle in this era. In addition, the transformation of the North Slope mine had further improved the smelting industry. With the bold planning of the Ministry of Construction and Lotus's cooperation, the dome of the shallow mine was blown up several times, turning part of the mine into an open-air mine, and the iron mine was the largest mining area. Since last year, Neverwinter's steel production had made a huge leap. The amount of steel produced in a month was more than that of all the other cities in Greycastle combined. But in Roland's view, this was a matter of course. If industrial production could not crush the steel that was tempered by blacksmiths, then there was no point in him wasting his time on these things. As for the tracks in front of him, it was part of the experimental railway that connected the mining area, the smelting area, and the docks. Since there was no significant difference in materials and load capacity between the broad and narrow rails, he deliberately used 1.5 meters as the standard distance between the railways. Not only was the number easy to remember, but the width of the two tracks plus the roadbed was also basically within the range of Lotus's ability. The sleepers were cut from logs, and the stone was taken from the debris of the mine after the explosion. If one did not look at the vehicles, these rails were exactly the same as the modern ones. However, with the start of the war to unify the country, the construction work was temporarily suspended. After all, what he wanted to make was still in the experimental stage, and it was impossible to build a factory before the final design was finalized. Therefore, both the processing and the installation of the rails were all done by Anna. Without Blackfire, the second half of the road was naturally impossible. Of course, these new roads alone could not satisfy everyone's curiosity. Under Roland's instruction, the workers uncovered a canvas shed at the end of the track. When the canvas, covered with dust and fallen leaves, fell to the ground, a black steel car appeared in front of everyone. "Your Majesty, is this a steam barrow?" Perrault, the governor of the Longsong area, asked in surprise. It was no wonder that he thought so. As the main part of the vehicle, the barrel-shaped steam engine mounted on the steel beam immediately attracted everyone's attention. As more and more steam engines were put into use in Neverwinter, the officials had gradually become familiar with this seemingly clumsy but infinitely powerful machine. Even in some traditional fields that required a lot of manpower, they would actively consider using the steam engine to achieve their goals, such as farmland irrigation, dock unloading and so on. It could be said that in the beginning, the factories that manufactured the steam engine and related supporting equipment would only receive production orders from Roland, but now they would occasionally produce special machines for the needs of the city hall. Even if the same gears, brackets and transmission rods were used, they could achieve completely different results with a slight combination. This was a very good sign. It meant that people had begun to change from passive production to active creation. For Perrault, since the cement boats driven by steam engines in the river were called paddle steamers, it was very reasonable for the car to be called a steam barrow. Of course, Roland did not want to sit back and watch the naming rights fall into someone else's hands. After all, this was an epoch-making means of transportation. Since the day it was born, the world ushered in a drastic change. Even though the speed of the prototype was not as fast as a horse carriage, even though it had been modified into all kinds of strange shapes, and even its power source had been changed several times, the original name was still deeply engraved in the history of human development. Train, Roland corrected. It's the key to solving the transportation problem. You want to build such a track on the prairie and then use it for the train? Berev read out this new word in a tongue twister. What if the demons attack the workers and obstruct the construction of the track? First of all, there must be at least 2 tracks to ensure that people can come and go at the same time. Secondly, I don't plan to cross the prairie. Instead, I'll set off from the misty forest until the nearest location to the Tequila ruins and then advance eastward. Roland told him the plan he had in mind. In this way, even if the months of demons come, Leaf can protect the track from demonic beasts. As for the demons, it's a battle of spears and shields. There's not only one position, but wherever the railway is built, the cannons will be set up. Even if they can tear down the railway under fire, as long as we build it faster, it'll be fine. Before returning to Neverwinter, he had discussed this with the general staff. Although the misty forest route seemed to be farther than the grassland route, the construction speed was much faster. The weeds and vines would automatically give way and form a natural drainage slope, which was a headache for most development projects. Under the command of Leaf, the forest could also take the initiative to carry construction materials, which could greatly reduce the burden of the hummingbirds. Chapter 925. 6 months, to build this kind of track to the depths of the barbarian land? After hearing Roland's plan, Barav, who had seen many miracles, widened his eyes in disbelief. But it took the Ministry of Construction more than half a year to build an ordinary road connecting the border and Longsong stronghold. Now the distance of this road is at least 5 times that of Kingdom Avenue. Are you sure Mr. Carr can do it? There was a lot of whispers on the scene. Kingdom Avenue was the first super-large project started by Roland after he took over Longsong stronghold. It involved as many as 2,000 workers, which was regarded as a pointless project at that time. The new road needed to be further developed. Coupled with the time limit, even all the workers in Neverwinter would not be able to meet the requirements. Carr van Bate, the Minister of Construction, did not say a word, as if he was thinking about the feasibility of the plan. Roland knew what these officials were worried about. After all, there were still many construction projects in the city, and it was impossible to invest all the resources in the railway. But in fact, compared with the cement gravel road, which needed to be graded and repeatedly rolled, the laying of the roadbed was much more convenient. As for the installation of the railway, which seemed complicated, it was actually the fastest part. He had seen Anna's demonstration of welding with Blackfire. It took her less than 10 seconds on average to connect the 2 broken points of a part like the railway. Compared with the traditional bolts or hot melt connections, the quality was better, and a lot of manpower and materials could be saved. Except for the lack of the nostalgic clanging sound of the old trains, it could be described as perfect. In fact, the experimental track in front of them was a quasi-seamless track. Except for the joints left by the heat stress of the steel, the whole top surface formed a smooth straight line. When the wheels rolled on it, there was almost no vibration. At that time, Anna only took half a day to complete this process. This was also the reason why Roland was confident in setting such a short time limit. In other words, if the workers spent 10 days laying the road foundation, it might take Leaf 5 days to place the sleepers and rails, and Anna only needed 1 day to weld them all. If he didn't deliberately accumulate the number, he would take the Maggie in the morning and return to the castle for lunch at noon. However, he did not explain in detail. After all, not everyone knew the abilities of a witch like the back of their hand. The other half a year was just a rough estimate. As soon as he arrived in Neverwinter, he went straight to the wolf girl and the meeting. He did not even have time to ask Tilly which witches had come to the sinking sleeping island. If there were suitable witches, the railway might have been built faster. Seeing that Roland didn't say anything else, the officials turned their attention back to the train. Compared to the modern railway, the train itself was undoubtedly a lot more antique. A complete locomotive was divided into 2 parts. The front part was mainly composed of the 4th-generation steam engine and transmission device, while the back part was the coal storage car. The driver's cab was located in the middle. Other than controlling the speed and sounding the steam whistle, it was also the driver's duty to manually add coal to the boiler. Although the train was still in the semi-finished stage due to the war, it was still much better than the first steam locomotive in the other world. For example, the steam worked directly on the crankshaft instead of the flywheel belt. Also, the wheels on both sides were equipped with a linkage mechanism without dead points, instead of relying on a single gear set to drive the wheels. During the design, Roland simplified all kinds of cumbersome functions and almost directly pieced several main parts together. From the perspective of the future, it had many shortcomings. The brake needed to be manually twisted by the winch, the driver's cab was rigidly connected to the girder, the driver could fully feel the agitation of the steam engine when it was working, there was no electrical equipment, and the crew needed to be notified by the whistle or the voice, etc. But in this case, it was already the best solution that could be solved with the current technology in Neverwinter. Just like the first-generation steam engine, he had to solve the problems first and then improve step by step. Your Majesty, this thing can carry a lot of goods. Kyle Seachy, the Minister of Chemical Industry, asked curiously, "How is it compared with those cement boats in the river?" "I think it shouldn't be a problem to transport 5 or 6 boats at a time," Roland said proudly when he saw the surprised look on the people's faces again. "But this is just the beginning. With the improvement of technology, it won't be a problem to transport 100 cement boats in the future." 100 boats? Bhairav swallowed. As the director of City Hall, he completely understood what this number meant. "Then, what about the speed?" Perrault's voice trembled slightly. "It's hard to say. It depends on the actual test results, but it won't be slower than the cement boats." However, in their eyes, the paddle-wheel cement boat that moved without any wind was already an extremely fast means of transportation. One had to know that in this era, land transportation was mainly carried by horse carriages or livestock. On the uneven and soft surface, one could well imagine the efficiency of transportation. If the cars ran a little faster, the axles of the cars without any shock absorber system would break and fall apart. Therefore, ships were the main means of transportation in the Kingdom of Greycastle. In the inland rivers, the steamboats, which did not need to rely on wind, obviously had an advantage over sailing boats. When they heard that the train's carrying capacity would only be greater and its speed wouldn't decrease, the group of people fell into a complete silence. Roland could not help but laugh in his heart. If he had said this 2 years ago, he would have been regarded as a lunatic. Looking at these officials who subconsciously wanted to deny it, but also had an expression of what if it was true, he could not help but feel quite happy. Although those descriptions were based on the fact that the ship technology was stagnant, now that the war was imminent, it was good to strengthen people's confidence. Moreover, he was not speaking without thinking. This was only an industrial product with the first generation of source power. When the second generation of source power, which was the internal combustion engine, came out, this epoch-making means of transportation would become the king of land transportation. "Your Majesty, can you show it to us?" the old director asked after a while. "Not for the time being. It's currently missing several key parts, so it's not really completed. It'll probably take about a week for everything to be debugged." Roland shook his head. "Before the war, you gave the Ministry of Construction a plan to connect the mine and the dock with the track, right?" Bhairav asked again. "What's wrong?" Roland sensed that Bhairav seemed to have something to say. "If it's really as you said, it will certainly have a positive impact on the City Hall's war propaganda." Bhairav voiced out his thoughts one by one. "Can you let your subjects witness this incredible scene with their own eyes on the day of the train's departure?" Roland immediately understood the director's intention. It seemed that the old director had also realized the importance of guiding the people in the past few years. "You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."